pleasure to introduce this gentleman to you. But before I do, I want to introduce the lady who's with him. And I'll ask her to stand. She's Miss Velma Nash McClure. Ms. McClure is the niece of Professor Nash and accompanies him when he goes to school to make speeches such as he's going to do for us. Let me tell you just a little bit about her. She has a remarkable family too. I told her during the second period that we had done a study on women's studies and should have mentioned some of her children. She has in her family an electrical engineer, a chemical engineer, and one studying to be an industrial engineer. In addition, she has her son on the cheerleading squad at UT. And I didn't know that back when I was up for the Mississippi game where I would have looked for Alan. He was the drum major of McMinn County High School's band several years ago. So she has reared in her home a very amazing family. And part of those engineers are women. They study they study all the science and all the math and all that stuff that you all consider very difficult. So she's quite a remarkable lady. She'll be speaking on the radio on Sunday about women's history. What time are you speaking, Ms. McClure? Between 9 and 10 on Sunday. So in her own right, the niece of Professor Nash is very remarkable. And now I get to the gentleman that is such a pleasure to bring to you. He is the most remarkable man I know. We had Dr. McDonald from UT speaking to us yesterday about how to do oral history. Back when we were working on the Hard Times Remembered project, I went to the retired teachers meeting in Athens and told them that I needed help. I needed some people to interview about what life was like in McMinn County back in the 1930s. And I passed a sheet of paper around the room and asked for people to put down their names and their telephone numbers if they would allow me to come and talk with them. When I got that sheet and saw that Professor Nash's name was on it, I knew who I wanted to talk to first. I grew up in McMinn County and had heard a lot about him, but I did not have an opportunity to meet him until I was doing that study. I met him when he was 95 years old. He will be 99 years old this summer, July the 10th. When I went to interview Professor Nash in our training, they had told us that perhaps our interview should run an hour or hour and a half. I really shouldn't tell this. I went about 10 o'clock in the morning. I had called and made an appointment. I was expecting something great, and it turned out to be just wonderful. I stayed till 4 o'clock that afternoon, 6 hours. I'm sure they thought this woman is never going to leave. But I was learning, he was teaching, and I was learning, and that's what he does best. He's an educator, and he was educating me. As we started our interview, he would come across a term or a person that I'd never heard of, and I'd stop and say, I don't know what you're talking about, and then he'd have to explain that to me. But he was kind enough when I left that day to invite me back. I was surprised at that. And at other visits, when I've been in his home, I've not stayed that long, but we've gone through picture albums and scrapbooks, and he has allowed me to go back and research his history. And that has been the most wonderful interviews that I've ever had. And I have learned more history from him than from anyone else. So it is a treat to present him to my students here at Englewood, Professor W.A. Nash.
This is Ealy, and the principal of the school is here. He's not in the building, he's in the room.
It's Mr. Decker.
Mr. Decker, is he here? Well, anyhow, I will address him anyhow, because he is the principal of the school, and so I address principal and Miss Ealy as your dear teacher. And it's needless for me to say that I'm glad to be here because that's kind of trite these days, but I'm like Minnie Pearl. Minnie Pearl says anybody as old as she is, you're glad to be anywhere. And so I'm kind of on that order. But to be frank with you, I am indeed glad to be here. I used to come over here in the 50s and talk to the classes in the high school, civics class and some of the other classes. And I was here a number of years. I used to talk with them, and I was at that time principal of Cook High School, but after I retired, I didn't come over anymore. And I know I said when I left home, I said, now I'm going over and talk to my grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, because none of your parents heard me. It's been so long, you see. You are the grandchildren of the students that I had such fine times. They were sharp, too. They could ask you more questions than a little. And we would talk a while, and then they would ask questions. And so we had great times right back in those days, and I'm sure you're having a great time now. And I had two very fine friends over here, and I know they passed before your time. Judge Stout was one of the squires of the county, and I used to have to come by here to see him when I was working on trying to get money for my school that we had over at Athens. And also Mr. Eugene Dodson. I don't know whether any of you have heard of him. He's passed long ago. He was one of the finest men I've ever met. And both of those men were, as far as that's concerned. And Mr. Dodson, of course, would come over to our football games and take up money for us. I mean, sell tickets for us. And do anything. He'd do anything that we asked him to do. One of the finest men. And I could name others. My wife, Mrs. Nash, nursed over here some. And of course, some of them may tell you about Miss Peck. She worked over here a long time. But anyhow, I feel very much at home here with you. And I hope you will ask me some questions about some of the things that I may talk about. Now, I was asked, of course, I know you call this Black History Week, but I was asked to not bother very much with that, because you can study that out of the histories. And I learned that you had Booker T. Washington and Du Bois. I want to say this much about them. They were men of two different philosophies altogether. Booker T. Washington had one philosophy, and Du Bois had another. And so I would say this about Booker T. Washington. He didn't fight Du Bois, but Du Bois did fight him politically and so forth. Now, I was asked, of course, to talk about somebody that's not worth much, but anyhow, somebody that had struggled in life, which I'm talking directly to you on this point, and that is, don't back up because you meet a struggle in life. That's about the subject of what I'm going to say. I was born in 1887. There were no no televisions, no radios, no automobiles, and I could go on for a length of time telling you what was not. But back in those days, we had many things to be proud of. To be an American citizen, you should be proud of that, regardless of whether you had automobile, not. But so now, as to my birth, I was born July the 10th, 1887, in a kitchen, in a slave house kitchen. I'm going to make a little explanation there. Now, when I say in a kitchen, you say, well, the kitchen is just one little room onto a house. But in those days, the kitchen to the big house was not built a part of the house. It was built about 20 or 30 feet from the house, and you had to cook over here in the kitchen and carry the food across to the dining room in the big house. That was the arrangement during slavery. And so the cook and her family usually lived in the kitchen. And the kitchen was one big room, of course. And it had a broad fireplace, and the hearth was about 3 feet coming out this way and reached all the way across there. And they had rods across over the fireplace that they hung the pots on. And the pots, of course, that they cooked in, they'd hang over that fire and cook. And so we would, they would, I'd say it that way, put the food on the skillets and set them along on this hearth here, and they would cook there, except that was in the pots, of course. And now the reason for this, the reason for this, you see, whether you know it or not, the South was the most aristocratic part of America to start with. You see, the English came over here and landed in Virginia, of course, to most of the English, and Scottish, English and Scottish. And they drifted south. And so the South has been the most aristocratic part of America back in that time, of course. Now I'll take my hand down. And so they had mansions. Those villages, they couldn't have smoke and food scent all in the mansion. And therefore, the kitchen was built that distance away, and the cook would live there with her family. And so my grandmother and my great-grandmother and my mother and I, we were all born in that kitchen. And we stayed in this kitchen until we stayed there until I was 4 years old. Our slave owners, the Englewood, I was supposed to be an Englewood, were very good. They were very good to their slaves. And my mother and my grandmother stayed there and cooked for the big house until I was 4 years old. And I had an aunt that had gotten married, and so she decided that we should stay there any longer. And so she caused us to have to move. And so we moved up to Mr. Ben Scott's house, a little old one-room house. You see, back there then the blacks didn't have homes much because it was just 23 years out of slavery. And so we moved up there. Now, at that time, our family consists of my grandmother and one boy 2 years older than I, which was, he was my uncle, and my mother, and my mother had I had a sister. So that was the family that moved away from the big house, from the kitchen, into a one-room shack, which was left over from the slavery, you know. They just had what's known as slave quarters, and they'd be a one-room building, and with a window in it, a cut in it, and it flat together, you know. And that's why here I got my hand up again. And so anyhow, this building we went to had one room and had one window, and so we stayed there. We didn't stay there but about 2 months. It caught a fire, and Mr. Johnny Bell came down there and got us and took us to his farm. And so we went over there. My grandmother was a stout person. She could plow and do things just like a man. And so when we were at Mr. Bell's the first time, we went there again. But she made a mighty good crop that year, and we were doing fine. And so we stayed there that year and the next year. But the next year, my aunt decided that she didn't want us to stay there, and so she moved us again, getting it closer to her, of course, up to Mr. Ben Skeltoff's house. And so it was another one-room building, but in this building, at that place, my grandmother died, and my mother got sick, and so this aunt took my uncles from us, and that left my mother and my sister and I there together. And so we stayed there, and now back at that time, after we left Big House, so after we left the Ingrams, well, we depended on days' work. These two women would do days' work, and they'd get 25 cents a day. And of course, a man at that time only got 40 cents and 50 cents. If he was a real good worker, he'd get 50 cents. But anyhow, we stayed there during that year, and we gave out everything that my grandmother had made, and my mother was sick, and there we were, hungry, just to tell it in plain English. So my mother got a flour sack. You've never seen a flour sack, but back in those days, and way on up, of course, flour was put in cloth bags, you know. We call it a flour sack. So she got this flour sack and gave it to me. We hadn't had anything to eat when we did it too, but anyhow, she gave me this bag. And the colored homes, or black homes, were half a mile away, back like that. And so I'd go to one and say, Mother said, will you lend a half a gallon of meal? And they'd make all kind of excuses. No, the man's gone to meal, but he hasn't got back yet. So I made those trips 3 days. And so the third day, I decided that I had heard, I had heard of a gentleman, white gentleman up the road about a half mile, that had some money, and that he was a good man, but he was a moonshiner and made whiskey. And so I said, well, I made up my mind. I said, now, if he's got money, I'm sure he's got some meal. Maybe he won't make an excuse. I'm going up there. Now, I was, at this time now, I was going on 7 years old. I was 6 going on 7. I'm going up there and ask Mr. Walter if he'd let me have a half a gallon of meal. And so I went, knocked at the back door, of course. He came to the door and said, what can I do for you, little man? I said, Mr. Walter, I said, my mother's sick, and if you let me have a half a gallon of meal, I'll pay you. And now, you see, I had been asking all the time that my mother said, but I'm saying that I said. And she said, well, come on in here, little man. So I went on in. He gave me half-gallon, put my half-gallon butter, half-gallon meal in the bag, and cut off a big piece of home-cured middling meat. I know you all don't eat that now. You eat breakfast bacon, you know, and ham and stuff like that. But if you want something real good, you get you a good big slice of good old middling, home-cured middling meat, and fry it, and you've got something good. So I was so glad I took my little bag and hustled on back home. And my mother, of course, got up and we had a feast with all the bread and meat. And so from that time until now, I have tried to ask for anything that I wanted or needed in my own name. Because people, you should have a reputation of such that you can get things on your name. Now, there, Mr. Bell came back and got us and took us back to his place. My mother was still sick, but he said, my mother's name is Linda. He said, Linda will get well, and so we meet her down there. And so she took us back down, Mr. Bell took us back down to this second home, second house that we moved to when we left Englewood plantation. And so at this place, I was 7 years going on, I mean, about 7 years old now. And so I stayed with my sister about a year and took care of her. We moved into a little one-room house down there. And so the time came, of course, that my mother wasn't making much. She wasn't doing so good. And so I went up to the well to get some water, and Mr. Bell had his trees trimmed, and the limbs were all on the ground, all around them. And Lucas Bell, one of Mr. Bell's boys, about my age, we were about the same age, and Calvin and Charlie, they had a saw with that sawing on them limbs. And so I went over and had another saw there. I said, and Lucas said, come on, Willard, and saw with me. And so I got a hold of that, and I sawed that. Mr. Bell came along and saw it. He said, Willard, I believe you'd make a good team with Lucas. I said, yes, sir. All right. So I went on back home with my water, of course. Next day he told my mother, he said, I want Lucas to have he used to call them a team, you know, two boys working on a farm. All of this is on the farm that I'm talking about. And so he let Willie stay here and work with Lucas to make a team out of Lucas, while Charlie and Calvin make the team. So I turned in there with him and my mother and my little sister, she stayed at home alone. And I had another sister by this time. And so the two of them stayed at home. And so I went to work then, just at age, just going into 8 years old. And I worked there with Mr. Bell and with my mother for about 3 years. But anyhow, now here's what we would do. Now we were on the farm now, bear in mind. We're not in the city. We would, my mother and I worked every day except Sunday. And of course she'd go back and milk the cows on Sunday morning and then Sunday evening. But we would do anything that's to be done on a farm that was not too heavy for a woman. I was just a boy. And now I'm going to tell you one thing that we did. Now we didn't do this all the time, but some people, when I tell it to you, they think that that's all you did. We would go and rake snow, maybe 2 inches deep, off of brush. You see, they cleaned up a lot of new ground. And when you cut a tree down, your limbs and all, they fall off there. And so they would clean up the new ground every year. And for the 3 years that I worked there, why, my mother and I would go out on sunrise and light, that snow off of the brush and start a fire. And you can burn brush in snow. And we work all day up to 12 o'clock, and at 12 o'clock we go into the house and eat, and then come back and work until sunset. And so that was one of the jobs we did. That was the hardest job, I'd say. But we hoed corn and tobacco and worked just like other farmers do. Now that was my work there. But at 9 years old, my uncle wanted me to come and work with him. And he was going to give me $9 for that year. And so, I mean, I was 12 years old now. Beg your pardon, I can give you everything. He wanted me to come and work with him for $9. That's where I got my bottle of my 9. So I decided to, me and my mother decided to let me go. And so I went up there and was working with him. And Mr. Johnny Bagley came over, and he needed a colored boy or a black boy to work at his place while his boys would go to school, you know. And by the way, that was one of my jobs all the way along because the white children went to school and we didn't because we were not in the school for us in that section. But anyhow, I went to work for my uncle. I stayed there only 2 months of that year. So in March, Mr. Bagley came up and said, "Page," I said, "Page, I see you've got a boy here. I'd like to have that boy to work for me. I don't have anybody to cut the wood and stuff around while the kids are at school." He said, what would you change to let me have?" My uncle was very fond of possum hunting, and a possum dog was a prize to him. He said, "I tell you what I'll do. If you let Willie go down there and with me, I'll give him $12 a year. Of course, I get my board and lodging to that. I'll give him $12, and I'll give the old maid, an old possum dog with a knot on her head. And so I tell them all that the man traded me for a possum dog with a knot on his head. And so I went down, I worked with Mr. Bagley 2 years. Then I went over and I got $12 the first year. I got $20 the next year. Bear in mind now, I'll get my board and lodging. Now my lodging at those places, that is not with my uncle, of course, I was sleeping in bed at that. My mother would give me 2 quilts, and I would sleep on 2 quilts and cover up with 2 quilts. Now, can you figure that out? Well, your mother gave you 2 quilts, and you slept on 2, and was covered up with 2. Okay. That doesn't work out, does it? But now I'll show you how to do it. Take your quilt, 2 quilts, lie them down, lay them down, and you lie on one half of them and turn the other half over you. So therefore you're sleeping on 2 quilts and lying on 2. And covered up with 2. But anyhow, I stayed there 2 years. The first year was 12, the next year was 20. The next year I went to Mr. Rudd, and he gave me $30 the first year. And then the second year, I got $40. So now I'm right at 15 years old, see. And so my mother left Mr. Bell. Now, she still was Mr. Bell up until that time. She left Mr. Bell and went to Mr. Anderson Bagley's place. And he wanted me to come over there and drive a road wagon. So I went over there with him and drove the road wagon that year. That was 1904. And well, I went over there in 1903, to tell the truth, and worked with him in 1903 and 1904. But in 1903, his brother was moving to Burkeville, Virginia, from Lunenburg, and had a big load of furniture. And I had to drive 3 mules to this road wagon. And so I took my road wagon that morning and had the furniture all loaded on it, and drove to Blackstone. It was 25 miles down there, and you had to stop on the way and feed your team and give them water, of course. And when I got there just at 12 o'clock, Blackstone. Well, when I drove into Blackstone, and they had an academy down there, White Academy. And back in those days, of course, you had to, those were private schools, of course. That was a private academy. And the private schools wore uniform. And I got there just at the time that they were letting out for Christmas. And the boys and girls had on these uniforms, and they were coming down to walk, coming towards the road. I was in the saddle on one mule, and had one in front, of course, and the other on the side. And I was working away. It was cold, snow on the ground, about a couple inches deep, and it was froze over. And so, but anyhow, they were having the biggest time. I'm sure you have good times like that. But they were having the biggest time, and it looked like they were so in harmony with everybody and themselves. And so I looked at it. I was a little bit cold, but I looked at it. I said, "No, that looks mighty good. That looks like a real life." And so I said, "Well, I'm going to do it someday, please." And so I went back home then. In 1904, of course, I was getting 50 cents a day then, you see. In 1904, I helped my mother with her 2 children. She had 2 children then, and 2 others. And saved up $11. And during that year, after a man, they had a smallpox in Chase City. And you know, a person who has a smallpox once, he have a good job when they have another that comes in the community, because he can work with it and not take it. And so this man, he came back from the Spanish-American War, and he had it in the Spanish-American War. So he came talking to us. He said, "There's a school up there at Chase City that'll take a boy and a girl and let them work their way through." I said, "Now that's my chance right now." And he said, I said, "How much do you have to pay?" He said, "You pay $5 a month. If you can, if you don't, well, they give you something to work on." So that was in 1904. And the Christmas 1904, going into 1905, I took $11. I saved up $11, and the amount of and a couple of suits of underwear, and a suit in my bag, and I walked 23 miles to Chase City in the Heartland Institute on January the 10th, 1905. I stayed there 10 years and worked my way through Thine Institute. And after I got through with Thine Institute, I went back home and started very good friends down there, started a summer school down there for me. Now, I worked my way through Thine Institute in the wintertime. In the summertime, I would go north and pick up a few dimes to help myself and my mother. And so, at the end of the 10 years, I made the 12 grades in 10 years. And I'll tell you how I used to sit in the room when I went in the first grade. The little children, you know, had little seats, and it was too small for me. And so I would put one foot on one side of that seat and the other foot on the other side, and pull it, and put the seat in front of me there. And the little desk was way down low. I think I got round shoulder from bending over to the little desk. But anyhow, I made it to the first grade at weighing 156 pounds and was about almost 6 feet tall. And so I said, you know what a fellow looked like going in your classroom now, like that, sitting down. One fellow said to me way afterwards, said, the reason I did that, I didn't have sense enough to know my condition. But anyhow, I made it. And so I went on then to home, and a very fine friend of mine knew me when I was born, as far as that's concerned. And he organized a little private school down there for me. And I taught down there 3 years at this private school. I had 50 students in my class, in my school. And I had the best time in the world. And I was up there about 2 months ago now, and I had the greatest time with their grandchildren. And so I had a talk with one. I had only one student there. That was 1917, when I was like 16, 15, 14, 15, 16. And so I had one privilege of talking to one of my students about a week ago, maybe, over the phone. She's the only one that's in the community that I now, but the grandchildren and children are still there. And she said, Willie said, we are still carrying on the program that you started here. I'm so glad to know they had one of my students had 2 lawyers. Another one had a preacher and a lawyer, not a preacher and a teacher. And the different ones had taken up different walks in life. And it seemed as though what I had tried to do had borne some fruit, and it made me feel so good. But anyhow, I stayed there those 3 years, and this is kind of funny too. I was up at the Thine Institute to alumni meeting, and one man said, we ought to stop eating up money here. Every year we just come here and eat up all the money that we all buy and eat up everything we have. And we ought to send some young man to college. And so one said, well, who are you going to send? He spoke up and said, send Willie. He's down there in Lunenburg butting the bull off the bridge. And so he said, all right, would you go? I said, well, I'd have to go back and talk with my board. And so he said, well, if you decide to go, you let us know. And we went down there. All right. I went back and told them. They didn't want me to go. So finally, I wrote them and told them, yes, I'll go. I'll go to college. I'm going down to Knoxville College. And so they said, all right, you go on down there, and we'll send you your money. Now, Knoxville College at that time, you had to pay $10 a month. And so I stayed down there about a month on the money that I had made. In the summertime, while I was teaching this private school, I farmed on my uncle's farm and made some tobacco that year, and so I sold my tobacco. And so, about the second month, they sent me $10, and that's the last I got. But I was so lucky that when I got there, it was 1917, and the boys were going to the army. And the chairman, or the student foreman was called to the army. And so I had worked a few hours with him and on the campus. And so he said, I'm going to the army and I'm going to recommend you to the president if if it's all right with you, and see if he will let you have my job. I said, oh, that's fine, thank you so much. And so now I was registered myself, you see. I was already ready to go to the army myself. So the president took me out to the office where they all went at that time to be exempt, and asked the superintendent to allow me to be exempt, change my card from Class A1, I was Class A1, to a Class 2B, which means that you work here and not leave here. If you leave, well, you have to go back you have to go back to the army. And asked me what I'd do. I said, yes, I'd be glad to do it. So I worked my way through Knoxville College, and I'll tell you how I worked it through. See, I had my mother still needed me in ways. And so I would get up, I'd give you my day, and I'll be through with the educational program. In the morning, I'd get up 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever time, I'd eat breakfast and go to school. I'd go to school until 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, I would come out, and my boys would come out, and we'd go to work on the campus, doing everything that is supposed to be done around there. That is, painting, or digging the ditch, or laying a boardwalk, or not a boardwalk, but a concrete walk, or whatever was to be done. We would work until 5. And at 5 o'clock, we'd go in, and we'd have supper pretty soon. I'd eat supper and go to sleep. And I'd go to sleep and sleep until 10. At 10, I would get up and take my, and get my clock and my pistol, and night watch until 3 o'clock in the morning. I did that every day for 4 years. No, yeah, 4 years. And so, now you say, how did you study? When did you study? Well, now listen, I'll show you. I had 6 houses to go to with my clock, to register my clock. And I could make that in about 15 minutes. So I would take my clock and run around to my houses and register, of course, and come back to my room. And you see, I had 45 minutes left to study between each trip. And so I did that. I stayed there 4 years and graduated, not with not a convoluted, but I graduated anyhow in 4 years and carried that close. And so at the end of when I finished Knoxville College, I was called to Athens as assistant principal. Now, that's prime. Now, I could tell a lot more about each one of those things I have spoken about. And so now I came to Athens, of course, and I found very fine friends there. And now, I have gone through with that. Now, that's where I got my education. Now, I want to say a little something to you about your education. Am I running over time?
Let me ask you, we're going to have a class change in just a few minutes.
All right.
Would you care to stay and continue after that, or to come back and visit with us either way?
Well,
Pick up from your Athens story.
I see. Well, let me say just one minute about what I want to say to Ben. Now, you know, Mr. Alexander, the governor, is trying hard to upgrade education. You heard about that. I've listened to all of his speeches, and I like something he says and something I don't like. I like when he says he's going to raise the teacher's salary. I say amen to that. They need more. He says he's going to get better equipment. Amen to that. But when he started this changing the rules for teachers to be jobs and all, they have to take examinations and somebody's carrying over a lot of red tape and stuff of that kind. I don't like that. And now, I haven't heard him say a thing about you children. Now, don't you know you have the key to his upgrade of education? You can stall the whole program by just not getting your lesson. And so now, if you want to help in this improving on education, you have the key in your hand. If you study, be studious, help each other, help your teacher, you'll help Alexander. You'll help yourself. And the time soon come. The time will soon come. Now you're not going to be young long. It'll get by you so quick. And so be good to everyone. Be good to your teacher. Now you say, well, how can you be good to your teacher? Well, she has nerves just like you. You can cut up and get on her nerves. You can be late in the morning, and she got to worry about you getting here. Be here on time every day. Because when you fail to be there, the very day you fail, they'll have something that'll come up on examination, and you haven't had it. And so you'll be here every day. You'll help your teacher in that way. You'll help each other. And see one of your brothers or sisters or neighbors, I should say, can't get here, help them to get here. And just be a student. Be a student. And I hope that the next time I come by, of course I won't be by soon, but anyhow, I hope you're the greatest success. I've enjoyed being here. You have been so studious. I'll have to give you credit. You're real students. I appreciate the way you have sat during this time and listened to me ramble. And so, you see, with my age, you see, will excuse me for rambling. Now, thank you so much. I hope to see you.
I want to say thank you to Professor Nash for coming our way, and I'll talk to him about picking up with the story of when he came to Athens. We've got about 60 more years there to cover, but 65 years, excuse me. I told you I was still learning. I'm never around him that I don't learn something, but I think you understand why I said he is the most remarkable man I know. He is a living history book, and he remembers all of this stuff and can share with us, and it fits right with what's in your textbook. It brings life to the textbook to have him come and share with us. So I want to thank him so very much, and then let me talk to him that I'd love for you to hear the other half of his story, because these are his years of accomplishment and what he did for this community, and why he is considered such a builder in our community. Thank you so much for coming our way. It's a pleasure today to have another 8th grade class that I can present Professor Nash to. I just told him that we watched the videotape that he made a year ago when he was here, and brought that information right on up to date to 1921. several of you did not hear my introduction on that tape yesterday because I was trying to get all of him in and none of me in second and third period. So I want to introduce this very attractive lady who's with him. I'd like to ask her to stand. She is Mrs. Velma Nash McClure. She is the niece of Professor Nash, and she's quite a person in her own right. I had told you all in class that she has raised a family that has been very interested in education. She has 3 engineers in the family. Part of them are women. Very proud of that. She has a son who's on the cheerleading squad at UT right now, and another daughter who will be graduating from UT this year. I just asked her if she had finished her computer class. When I talked to her, I guess during the Christmas vacation or sometime along about there, she and her husband were getting ready to take a computer class. So you have a family that's very interested in education, and they are continuing that. So she is quite a remarkable lady in her own right. She is a writer. Some of you all are struggling with your writing in 8th grade English classes. About a month ago, she had an article in the DPA, and she has written a play that her church has presented, the Presbyterian Church there in Athens. So it's a pleasure to have Mrs. Velma Nash McClure here today. Ms. McClure? Thank you. Now for the gentleman that I have told you that I have learned more history from than anyone else. He's still doing what he does best, teaching. And I guess you'd say he took me on as a pupil. I did not meet him until he was 95 years old. It's not often you can say that about someone, but this summer, July the 10th, Professor Nash will be 100 years old. I hope that my mind will be as active as his when I reach that plateau, if I ever do, although at my age, it wanders all over the place. I told Ms. McClure that I wanted him, when he came today, to say a few words about Booker T. Washington. And we had covered that in your history, and he was a great admirer of Booker T. Washington. And so I'm going to read the introduction to the biography of Booker T. Washington before he comes up here to speak. So I'll be reading from this book, and I have a paperback copy of this, Up From Slavery. Professor Nash has gotten another degree since he was over here at Englewood last year. He has a long string of honors, more than you could ever mention. But last June, something else happened to him. He is now Dr. Nash. Tennessee Wesleyan College awarded him an honorary doctorate degree. So I'll probably go right on calling him Professor Nash, as I have for some years now. But he is Dr. W.E. Nash, and had that honor since he came our way last year. I don't want to take up too much of his time, so I want to read today to you from the book Up From Slavery about Booker T. Washington. I have carefully consented to prefix a few words introductory to this autobiography. While I have encouraged its publication, not a sentence has been submitted to my examination. From my intimate acquaintances with the subject, because of my connection with the Peabody and the Slater Educational Funds, I'm sure the volume has such a strong claim upon the people that no commendation is needed. The life of Booker T. Washington cannot be written. Incidents of birth, parentage, schooling, early struggles, later triumphs may be detailed with accuracy, but the life has been so incorporated, transfused into such a multitude of other lives, broadening views, exalting ideals, molding character, that no human being can know its deep and beneficent influence, and no pen can describe it. Few living Americans have made a deeper impression on public opinion, softened or removed so many prejudices, or awakened greater hopefulness in relation to the solution of a problem, encompassed with 1,000 difficulties and perplexing the minds of philanthropists and statesmen. His personality is unique. His work is exceptional. His circle of friendships has constantly widened. His race, through its utterances and labors, has felt an upward tendency, and he himself has been an example of what worth and energy can accomplish, and a stimulus to every one of both races, aspiring to a better life and to doing good for others. It has been said with truth that the race problem requires a patient and wise cooperation of the North and the South, of the white people and the Negroes. It is encouraging to see how one true, wise, prudent, courageous man can contribute far more than many men to the comprehension and settlement of questions which perplex the highest capabilities. Great eras have often revolved around an individual, and so in this country, in its singular that, contrary to what the pessimists have predicted, a colored man, born a slave, freed by the results of the Civil War, is accomplishing so much toward the pacification and good citizenship. While Mr. Washington has achieved wonders in his own recognition as a leader and by his thoughtful addresses, his largest work has been the founding and the building up of the Normal and Industrial Institute at Tuskegee, Alabama. That institution illustrates what can be accomplished under the supervision, control, and teaching of the colored people, and it stands conspicuous for industrial training, for intelligent, productive labor, for increased usefulness in agriculture and mechanics, for self-respect and self-support, and for the purification of home life. A late circular of the trustees of Hampton Institute makes the startling statement that 6 million of our Negroes are now living in one-room cabins. Under such conditions, morality and progress was impossible. If the estimate be approximately correct, it enforces the wisdom of Mr. Washington in his earnest crusade against the one-room cabin, and is an honorable tribute to the revolution wrought through his students in the communities where they have settled. Every student at Tuskegee, in the proportion of the impression produced by the principal, becomes a better husband, a better wife, a better citizen, a better man or woman. A series of useful books on great educators has been published in England and in the United States. And while Washington cannot, in learning and philosophy, be ranked with Pestalozzi, Freeble, Hopkins, Wayland, Harris, he may be truly classed among those who have wrought the grandest results on mind and character. From my knowledge of Professor Nash, one could say the same thing about him. And he's here today to start with the time that he came to Athens and bring us right on up to date. His life has made a lasting influence on the community, and he was recognized as one of the community builders in a ceremony by the Athens Chamber of Commerce. He is the most remarkable man I know, and I've told you I've learned more history from him than from any other individual. And Professor Nash, it is wonderful to be able to present you to another group of 8th graders here at Englewood School.
Fifth trip to Englewood School. I was here 3 times in the high school and talked to the senior class when we had high school about 50 years ago. If your father is not over 40 years old, they were not even born when I was here before. But the Lord is so fixed that I'm back here again today. And as I began to think about what to talk about or what not, I began to think about why am I here? Why are we making this effort? What is it for? What's the real substance and the desired outcome? And it's very simple. It's that we may, in some way, encourage you, inspire you, and motivate you to become what you are capable of becoming. That's all. We want you to feel like, I'm sure Miss Ealy has this in mind, feel like that there is no such thing as you can make a mark in life, regardless of your starting point, regardless of the conditions and circumstances under which you were born. You can see from the life of Booker T. Washington. He was born on salt mines up in West Virginia, poor boy, and he made it to the top, I'd say. One of the greatest. I was glad to have Miss Ealy to read that to you, because I'm only just a feeble instrument of bringing what little I can bring to you. But the man who wrote that about Mr. Washington was a man of great outstanding character at that time. And he was the one, of course, or one of the ones who actually helped Washington on his feet. And so I was glad you would read that for me to you. And as I was going on to say, our purpose then is to show you what can happen when one wants to do, wants to work, wants to become something, and is willing to pay the price. And that's our purpose here. Now, of course, Booker T. Washington, as we've already said, made a great mark in life, and we're glad to bring him to you in the way we're bringing him to you. And of course, we'll say this, that Mr. Washington lived and attained greatness very early. He died but before he was 60 years old. And so he played his part there, and my part is that I've lived to be 100 years old. So that'll help you to say that there's no such thing now as giving up. Don't give up. Don't give up. Stick to it. And we hope that the thing that as I mentioned, that our purpose is that you may be encouraged to make the great life out of yourself. Now about Mr. Booker T. Washington, what I know about him, of course, as I said, the man who wrote the introduction knew more about him than I did, and he was living at that time, and therefore he could speak with authority. But now, I had the opportunity of seeing him and shaking hands with him and hearing him speak on one occasion. In 1906, I was working in Hamlet, Pennsylvania, and Uncle and I, he was 2 years older than I was, and so we decided that we'd take a little vacation and go over to East Orange, New Jersey, where his sister and my sister were living at that time. Well, his sister, of course, was my aunt, as you understand. And so we got over there, and we got there. There were two girls from Cambridge, Virginia, up there in East Orange. Fanny and I were more on G. And so they planned this night a straw ride for the two youngsters who had come to visit. And now there we were hung in between two opinions as to whether to go on the straw ride or to go out to the auditorium to hear Booker T. Washington speak. Well, of course, we knew the girls had made quite a little effort to have a slant or so forth. So we decided to go on the straw ride. And of course I regretted it since. But of course we did have a nice time. And so therefore I miss hearing him in person and seeing him, of course, and seeing him as a human being in front of me. Well, anyhow, when he made this speech in Atlanta in 95, in which he made the statement, of course, that we should let our bucket down where we are. Meaning, of course, that the Negro, especially speaking, should make his home in the South and buy property and rear a family and make a life right where he is. And he also held his hand up and made a statement in that speech that we can be as united as the fingers in all things civic and political and all those kinds of things. And then in social, we'd be as separate as the fingers apart. Those two statements, of course, set off, of course, they were well taken by the southern white people and the white people all over everywhere, because that was seemed to be, at that time, the bone of contention was that some of the blacks, we call them blacks now, if you call one black at that time, he'd report you. So now we call them blacks, and I could explain that to you, but anyhow, Du Bois, of course, led the fight, of course, that those two statements signified that he was willing to take us back to slavery. And from that angle, of course, Du Bois, of course, started his drive against his idea. And of course, the difference between the two men was so great, of course, that no one hardly knows until they live back in those times. Now, I didn't get to meet him personally, but Mr. Clay, R.E. Clay, the man who I met in State College, who was personnel manager for NIC College for a number of years, he traveled with Booker T. Washington and introduced him and spoke on the Anti-Saloon League. And so he told me all the things that I actually knew about him back in those days. But he is a wonderful man, and he lived a wonderful life, and he left a wonderful contribution to humanity. I put him at the top of the list, among the top of the list of human beings who have existed on the earth from how many ages back, in living a heritage or living a line of thought beneficial to the progress of man. And so, leaving him now, I was asked, of course, to say a few words about the building of Cook High School. Now, I shall not take very much time, and I want you all to cut me off. Don't let me go over time, because you have in the article there all that I had tried to do. The writer over at wrote a little sketch, of course, of the things, of what I tried to do. And so I'm going to sketch them in a few places. I came to Athens on July the 15th, 1921. I think she had it 22. But anyhow, 1921, and so I first went to the principal's home, who was a pastor, his First Presbyterian Church, Reverend C.S. Wilson, and there I got the keys to my room in the teacher's home, and I got there about 9 o'clock, and he would have a devotion, and so I would knock on the door until he got through. When he got through, of course, he came to the door, and I got the key and went to my room. It was about 9 o'clock, came in on the train from Knoxville, and so then I went to breakfast over at Mr. Spriggs. Mr. Pat Spriggs had a restaurant over there, and ate breakfast, and when I came out from my breakfast, Abner King came along and said, I'm on my way to the Zion Methodist Church, and I would like to let you go along with me. I said, yes, I'll do that. So I went on, and I went up there, and that morning, a lay preacher by the name of Sam Greenwood preached a sermon. And of course I can't, never did catch exactly the subject, but I know he said this. He said, everybody's talking about Athens coming back. Athens is going to be, Athens is great and all that. He said, hell wouldn't have Athens this morning. I said to myself, well, now he may be introducing Athens to me because I had just come in and he knew I was there and he knew that I was there to be assistant principal. So that was all right for them. And I then, we went back home. I met Arthur Ferguson, citizen, there that day. And I said to Arthur, I would like to go to town from what I can see of it. He said, well, now listen, tomorrow, what are you going to be doing? I said, well, I won't be doing anything, I don't think. He said, well, I'll be by your house and take you down and let you meet the superintendent and the board members of the school board. Arthur, by the way, was a little bit against the United Presbyterian Mission, and he was thinking that he was kind of pruning me to bring a fight against it, maybe, so that the city would build a school. So he came and got me, and we went to town. The first place he took me was to Charleroi, to Bayless Hardware. And Charleroi was one of the clerks there. And he swore in and shook hands with him and handed his hand up and said, Charlie, this is Professor Nash here. And so I said, wait a little while, you know, and President Mr. Raymond pushed his hand up and I shook hands with him. Now you might wonder why I hesitated there. Well, I was real, and when I came up, a black man, we call him black now, never pushed his hand out first to a white man to shake hands with him. He'd wait for the white man to push his hand up, and then he'd shake hands with him. And another thing, he gave me his first name, Charlie. That's something else we didn't use where I came up. After a white boy was 12 years old and a little over, why he was called Mr. from then on by the black. And so when I went outside, I told him, I said, Mr. Ferguson, will you please give me the surname of the gentleman? And of course, I don't call him by the first name. So that was my first interest into it. So he took me then to Mr. Lockmiller, Frank Lockmiller, who was one member of the board, and to Dr. Riddle, Dr. Miles Riddle, and then to Dr. Grant, and Dr. Craig was teacher at Western College, and he was not in town. So he took me then to the post office and introduced us to John Elliott. And then he took me into the courthouse, and Mr. Underdown was county court clerk, and Clay Madlock was county chairman, and he introduced me to those two men, and then to around that, and then we went on back home, and so I then made up my mind that Athens was the place for me, because those men were the finest men, among the finest men I've ever met. So then I spent 5 years then in the mission school and in Burns. During that 5 years, of course, I had made contact with the United States College. I taught over there one summer, and so it comes time now for the board, the United Presbyterian Board, to drop the work at Athens. Well, that meant the job had to get a job someplace. And so instead of, I had some jobs offered to me. I was in the history class in Boston High School in Knoxville, and also the college wanted Ms. Nash and I to come to Knoxville. She was a registered nurse and let her take over the hospital, had a little hospital there, and let me take the farm. And so I was planning to go with Mr. Ramey, send word by my wife that for me not to leave town. So they gave me the principalship of the school, new school. We took it over with 150 students, only 150 students, and 9 grades, of course. And that was very, nine grades, that last grade only had 4 in it, 5. But anyhow, we started with that. They built us a 6-room building with 5, and give us 5 teachers in the cell, and we started off with that. And in 8 years, I'll have to stop, hold on, in 8 years, we had built that school from that 150 students to 375. And we had entered into it, incorporated into it, or whatever you might say, all of the things that an ordinary high school at that time, all of the things that were common in the school. We had basketball, football, track, we had Boy Scouts, highwire, and home economics, manual training, and all of those things. Now I'm sure you boys, I gotta call you boys, like basketball. I'll give you a little story about our basketball team, and then I'm going to stop, because I know I'm taking too much time now. But anyhow, we had, after we were there, 8 years, we had a manual training teacher that was very common. And so he took the seats up and put them on slides and used the auditorium for gymnasium. And we practiced basketball. So we finally got, on 33 I believe it was, we got to go to Nashville. I only had 7 boys. And I had a manual training teacher, but he didn't know a thing about basketball. We had 7 boys. We took that 7 boys and the manual training teacher and I, with 2 cars, we went to Nashville. When we got there, now I'm telling you this to give you this point. A boy or a man or whatnot who is sleepy, tired, hungry, and has dissipated a lot cannot play basketball. Now, if you want to be a good basketball player, you must keep your health straight. So here's what we had. We went over there, and when we got there, we stopped at Murfreesboro and ate dinner, and we got to State College about 35, 40 minutes after that. And so I told the boys to go to the dormitory, take a shower, and go to bed. And so they did. And it's time for dinner. I said, I'll bring you your dinner. On my way over to the dining hall to get the dinner for the boys, I met this coach the principal from Kingsport, Mr. Darby. And he had been coaching State College and know all about looking after players. And I said, Dobbins, I said, I have a boy on the team that wants some bologna for dinner. Would you give it to him? He said, no, we'll give it to him. I said, that's really how we give it to him. So then he says, who are you going to play? I said, we're playing Booker T. Washington from Memphis. Now, we were a school of about 50 high school students, and Booker T. Washington was a school of 1,900 high school students. We were about 8 years old, not quite 8 years old, and Booker T. Washington was 40-some years old. So he said, you're playing Booker T. Washington? Give him what he wants. Don't bother with it. Just give him what he wants so you don't have a show. You don't have a chance. And so I took it to them, so they ate, and I kept them in the bed and in the shower bath for 4 days. That is from Thursday night until Saturday. We first beat Booker T. Washington. That is the setup of the year, upset of the year. I then beat Seville, not Seville, Darwin School up at the Kingsport. And then I beat a school at Centerville. That's the one. That was the first one we did, Centerville. And then Darwin School. And then we beat Booker T. Washington. Then we played Lebanon for the championship. And so when we got through, when we were on 5 minutes before the end of the last game, the final game, we were 2 points ahead. And one of our boys, we had a big man, I'm a big boy, bust his shoe. And when he bust his shoe, we had to take him out and put it on the circle. One of the on the circle had to in. And for the next 5 minutes, they got a 2 ahead of us. And we came away with second place. One of the greatest upsets that ever happened anywhere. And so my point in that, in telling you that, because I know you all like athletics, if you want to be an athlete, take care of your body. Take care of your body. Now, I could go on and tell you about how we had children to come here from North Carolina and from Meigs County and Loudoun County and brought this students together. Now, and here's what I hold was the secret of our success there. Everybody was there to work. We wanted to learn. We wanted to know. We wanted to be successful. And therefore, we were willing to pay the price. We had a good time. Our boys went to basketball and football. I'll tell you a little joke about the football team. The first football team, we used part of the city boys and county boys. We had a team from Freeport to come down. They were made up of city boys and student boys. And of course, we didn't know anything about football. And so we got the game going. And we had a boy by the name of Boyd Love. All was fast. He was fast. And so we were playing the game and we thought we were going along pretty good. And so passed the ball and Boyd got it. And instead of going towards the opposite goal, he turns around and goes back towards our goal. That's as hard as he could run, and he could run too. And his daddy was on the sideline, about 2/3 from him. And he ran down the sideline and come on, Hoyter, come on, Hoyter. And Hoyter was going the wrong way. And so they took the ball, and of course the referee ran on it when he carried across the line. He took 6 and took the ball back out there and then from to kick the score. And side, and the ball went to the side and hit the man on the sideline out there. And so that was a lot of fun, and it showed that we didn't know anything about football, too. And so now I could go on and talk all day with you, and so now I know my time's up. Nobody's touching me. And so, and we now high wire. I'll say just a word about that. Mr. Neil Ensminger came over and introduced the high wire and set the high wire up for us. And that was quite a favor that he did us. And also, it turned out to be one of our main features. We had the high wire from Knoxville. In other words, we had a conference there once. And we had from all of the high schools around. And then we also, in our Boy Scouts, we had a nice Boy Scout troop there. And we had a man come from Knoxville as a general leader, and we had leaders there. But anyhow, I shall not take more of your time because I have tried to give you our purpose for coming over here, and for what I found Mrs. Ealy's purpose was in it, that we might encourage you, that we might let you see that persons can start from very low, very insignificant in their nature and everything of that kind, but with hard work and effort and a little assistance from the side, we can make a life this worthwhile.
Mr. Nash, you were going to tell them about the Nash Scholarship.
Oh, yeah. That is something that we tried with. I was in town one day, and Lawyer Dugan, young Lawyer Dugan, met me in the hall. We had been there about 20 years, maybe, or something like that. And he said to me, Professor said, you and Willie, my wife was named Willie, and I called her Willie. And he said, you and Willie, you all worked hard. We ought to do something for you all, for the school, something like that. He said, I'll tell you what, you go on back, and I'm going to send you $50 up to the school. You use it any way you want to. So I thanked him. I said, thank you, Lawyer Dugan. So we went on back, and a few minutes after I got there, he called me and said, Chris, I want to tell you that you don't bother about the $50. He said, I've seen from some of my friends, and I'm going to send you a check for $800 as a scholarship. I said, well, Mr. Dugan, if you've given me that much, I think we ought to have a little organization. I said, about it. And he said, all right, where? I said, well, I'll be down to your office, and you can call some of those who have promised you money, and you'll make a little organization of it, and then name it, and so forth. So I went down, and so we met, Mr. Dugan and Roy Washington, and Mr. Ray Hammer, or somebody, one or two others. Anyhow, we met, and we said, well, we'll name it the Nash Scholarship. And for 15 years, until the school closed, of course, I think about 15 years, Mr. Dugan died after about 4 or 5 years old, but they just passed on. The last man that handled it was, I don't know whether it wasn't Washington. It's a man that's over there now. What's his name? I can't think of his name. But anyhow, Judge Lloyd Hart. He was the last one to handle it. And so he, every year, at time for, and we divided that into 2 scholarships of $400 each. And they were given this way, $200 would be given the first year. In fact, then you see college prices, charges wasn't like they are now. And $200 to pass that to get the other $200 the next year. And so it went on until the integration. And the integration, I decided that they instituted that program because we blacks didn't have much to go on. And it was primarily for the blacks. And as we were going into integration, I didn't want it to be that in a white school with a few blacks, that a scholarship would be given only to blacks. And so I talked with Mr. Carter, and we decided that we just drop it. And so that we ended at that time. But the man would give $100, and as one would drop out for various reasons, some dropped out because they died, and some lost their businesses so that they couldn't go on, and so that another would pick up and take on. And so many of the boys and girls who received that scholarship are now doing wonderful work for the people, wherever they are. It seems as though we have to pick up those who are capable and willing to do the work that a student should do and really make something out of it. And so that is one of the things that I feel very proud of, that the Lord gave us that privilege to do that. And we did some other things that we could not make. Now, I'm sure my time is out.
Would you care to tell them about the closing of Cook High School and introduction and the part you played in that, Mr. Ealy? Would you care to tell them about the closing of Cook High School and integration and you and Mr. Neil Edsman's part through that time?
Well, Mr. Edsmanger and I have been good friends. In fact, my real friend to start off with was Judge E.B. Madison. I don't know whether you know him. I was just reading that from him here over the radio there last night. That Mr. Madison was a direct descendant of President Madison. And President Madison was the originator or the real background in writing the Constitution of the United States. And I can see why Judge Madison was such a smart man. Now, in the closing out of the school and those things, Mr. Edsmanger gave me all the privileges a person in his position could give me or give anyone. And we did our best. In other words, when I came to Athens, I found a good spirit, and it was my objective the whole time I was there to see to it that the relations between the races would not would not go down, but get better. And we worked together with Mr. Edsmanger and Mrs. I forgot who she was. She would write about our school so much, I asked her not to write because Miss Bradley. Because people would get jealous of us, you know. And so we worked hard, and I'm still working on that, as the boy said. I don't believe in wild-eyed, half-thought out policies in race relations. I want it to be on the square, on the right side, giving some and taking some. That's what we have to do now. We can't get all we want, but we can get a part, and the other fellow will get a part, and that's what we'll make up. And so, Mr. Edsmanger and others worked well in the transfer. I have challenged on many occasions that Athens, McLean County, made the transfer as well or better than any other town of its size or whatnot in America. We had no friction whatever. Every teacher in the black school, you know, it's hard for me to say black because I was brought up on Negro and colored folks, you know. But you want to know us now as black. And if I had time, I'd tell you how that started. But anyhow, I've challenged in many occasions that I've had since integration that anyone would kind of challenge me. Every teacher in the schools got a job, and most of them got the same kind of job they had in Cook School. And I never heard one word. Now, if there's a word spoken, it might have been, but I haven't heard of one word of the student body. Now, back to the students, I want to tell you, you don't know the power that you have, students. As students, you don't know the power you have. Because you can flare up and have a discontent or become discontented and disturb the whole community. And I haven't heard of one student, either black or white, having any objection to going into the integrated program. And I think that is wonderful. Now, who was it? Well, I won't go into that. But anyhow, Mr. Indiana and others worked their part, and the student bodies of McLean County, yours included, or she could have started something over here, and it would have spread it all over, and everything came out, and we're still going along, and I don't hear any politics. I was against busing, and that is a busing, post-busing. I'm still against it because I think you should zone your town or your county or whatever it is, and let the children that live in that zone go to that school. And not take a bunch up there and send them over to Athens, and take a bunch from Athens and bring them over here, and then take a bunch from somewhere else and take them down yonder, just to say that there's 10% black and 10% white, or 50% or 90% white, or whatever not. That's out of place. And that is the one thing that I hated about the integrated program, that the law, the powers that be, said how we will have a Now, I do thank you for listening to me all this time, because I know I hadn't done anything but ramble, and I guess I've gotten to the age now that you'll excuse me for doing that, because everybody doesn't hold themselves together long enough to not ramble after they get to my age. And so, may God bless you. I'm sure I won't be back here again because time is, Father Time is throwing a rock at me now, and he's hitting me pretty hard. And so I'm sure I'm saying farewell to you, and may God ever bless you. Every one of you, your parents know. I wish I could see some of those students who used to be here with me when I used to come back over here and speak to the senior class. And may God bless you. And I'm sure the Lord will to continue to carry on in the world as you have done in the past. And I want to thank you again and the principal of the school for allowing me to come here and ramble over the things that they said they thought they wanted me to say. And thank you again.
I wonder when Professor Nash came to Athens in 1921 if he thought he'd still be teaching in 1987. think of that. Would any of you have any questions you'd like to ask Professor Nash?
I'll be glad to try to answer anything.
Saw some of our athletes smiling broadly when you were talking about the state tournament.
Yeah.
Do any of you have any? I do want you to know that Cook High School was an accredited high school, and Professor Nash is the reason that they gained accreditation. That's going to mean a lot to you as you go on into high school, because when you get your high school diploma from an accredited high school, you'll be accepted into college. There won't be any questions asked. And Professor Nash made sure that Cook High School was accredited. I do want to tell you this, when I was doing my interviews with Professor Nash, I found out that his 5 teachers and himself at Cook High School were better qualified than the white teachers in the white school system at that time. All of them had college degrees. We couldn't say that about the other schools of McMinn County. And so here is the man who made that possible and saw that they taught in their areas that they knew the most about. Have any of you thought of any questions now?
May I say that
Back over to the mic.
may I say that the 5 teachers and six rooms only lasted 2 years. And we went right on to 12 rooms and 11 teachers and a principal. And we went on from 9th grade to 12. And we only had, now this might sound like black boasted, we only had 1 student to go to Cook High School and to go to a college and returned away. Out of all we sent from place to place. And here he came from Atlanta, and he was in the 10th grade, I think, when he came. And they required at that school a writing of an essay, I believe it was. And this young man didn't have the background to write a good essay, and he was turned down. All the rest of them, after we got to senior high, and of course they went to State College, SIS, and Knoxville College, and Virginia State College. I could just trace the colleges around. They just took the show the diploma and before training. And so that was all, as she said, that was our objective. To teachers and the students, as I told you, they acquired that by getting down and going to work and enjoying it, loving it. And I'm saying to you, the last thing, love your work. Always love your work. Love to go to it. Don't let anybody call you to not want to work on your class work. So I wanted to drop that. Thank you.
Now, if you ask tomorrow, I may not know it, so if you want to ask anything today.
What were the elementary schools named for the blacks? We hear a lot about Cook High.
Cook High
How were
School.
the black elementary students educated?
Oh, yeah. The black elementary school that I came here to
And move back over to the mic.
Oh, yeah. It was known as Athens Academy. And it was run by the United Presbyterian Board out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And they paid all of our salaries and paid all the utilities and everything. And one year, I have it in a little sketch over there. The county paid $400. You see, those mission schools had to be, I came to this town as a missionary. I still don't know exactly how it was. Because the United Presbyterian had 15 mission schools spread out from Camden, Alabama to Norfolk, Virginia. And Athens was one of them. And so I was sent here by the Board of Home Missions from from Pittsburgh to be assistant principal in the elementary school, of course. It had been once a high school, or called a normal at that time, but they got to fussing with the Zion Methodist Church up there, and they pulled their students out. That was before I got there, and we cut it back down to 8th grade, and had only got back to 9 when I came. But it was called Athens Academy. And
Cook High School was first through 12.
yeah, Cook High School, of course, it went on, and one way we got in a lot of our students, we took in Riceville clothes and Calhoun clothes and Breast Mountain clothes. And then we had students, during the time there, we had students from New Jersey, from North Carolina, from South Carolina, from the 3 counties around us, Meg, Monroe, Bradley. And so that's where we built our school. But we knew we didn't have students enough in that many counties like to run a high school, to tell the truth. But we built the board so kindly gave us some little dormitories over there, and we had 24 students that stayed over there. So it was a cooperative program that we carried out that helped us to do what we did. Another question?
Anyone else? Brady?
I was wondering, like, when you first moved here, did you stay here or did you move around?
He wants to know where you lived when you first moved here.
Well, you see, I was single. I wasn't even married.
Oh, I thought you were married.
No, I wasn't married. I didn't marry 30 days after that. Yes, you see, the teacher's home. The United Presbyterian Mission School had a teacher's home. And they had a room. These teachers, they got $40 a month and a room and a kitchen, of course. And so when I came, Reverend Wilson knew me. We were together in Virginia together. And he was the man up there. And so when I came, as I told you a while ago, I found him having devotion, and he handed the keys after he got through, and I went to this teacher's home. It was in the summer, July 15th, on Sunday morning. And I went to this teacher's home, and he had a room picked for me as I was single. And so he acted as though he didn't know I was single. He said, well, you're not married. I said, no, I'm not married. I said, well, I've been married about 30 days. And so I made my home in the teacher's home and did my own cooking and everything that 30 days or 40 days or something like that. So I lived right there in the teacher's home then for 5 years. When the school building burned, then I had built me a house before that time. And by the way, I owned quite a number of houses in Athens at the time. And it's been my policy to do this. Treat everybody right. Don't try to cheat anybody. And before you treat a person, let them cheat you. Don't wear that over your head that you cheated anybody, mistreated anybody. And that's been my policy. I have paid as high as $1,500 for a house, more than a man asked for me to give it. Because I knew he didn't know the value of his house, and I knew that the house was worth that much more, so why should I beat him out of $1,500 or more? And in many cases, I have paid more than the person asked for the house or the property. And I haven't lost anything. I'm not broke yet either. That's that. I'm not boasting, but I'm saying, if you do right, you won't get broke so quickly.
Professor Nash, we've had another question here.
Okay.
One of our students, when you mentioned the terms Negro, colored, and black, he said, would you care to take some time and discuss the use of those terms?
Now, when I was a boy, we called ourselves, and what people call Negro, or niggers. That was of slavery. See, I was 23 years out of slavery. And of course, it went on and decided we call ourselves colored. And so we took up the word colored and dropped the word Negro, nigger, because that didn't sound so good. So after we had gone on for a few years with the word colored, someone came along and said, well now, we're not so much colored, but we are Negroes. And so that went like wildfire over, and so we were very angry to call them niggers, but we were glad for you to call us Negroes. And so that went on for a number of years as Negroes. And we were satisfied for anyone to call us a Negro, but not a nigger, you see. And so then Carmichael, a fellow from Africa, came over here and thought that he could stir up something, which he did. He said he was the author, you might say, of all that fire, burning and throwing rocks and sitting and so forth. He was the author of all of that. And he put this idea up. He said, now listen, we go around talking about we are the minority race. He said, we're not in the minority race. He said, we are majority race. And he said, well, how was that? He said, all black people, all the people all over the world, only about a certain percentage, you didn't say exactly, are white, and the rest of them are black. He said, the Japanese, Chinese, all the islands of the sea, all of them are brown, and different color of black, naturally going to a black head. And therefore, if you say you're black, you become a majority race and not a minority race. And therefore, that took on. And since that, why we've been called, going around saying black. I know when if you call a Negro black, he fights you from here to the street or something. But because he didn't want to be called black because the devil was black, you know. If you think of the devil being black. But anyhow, that's the way it has worked up from nigger to Negro to colored to black. Any other questions? And did I explain what you wanted?
Richard, did that explain it? You can almost tell which decade of history you're reading by which terms they're using when they write. You can almost pick up a book and hit the right decade.
She took nursing while I was taking my college, and she finished 2 years before I did. She only had to put 2 years in up there because she had put in 2 years down in Meridian, Mississippi. They had a hospital down there. She started her course down there, so she came up there and put 2 years in, and was out in 2 years, and I had to spend 4, so we were good together doing that 2 years. Work there, and then when I came to Knoxville that Saturday Sunday, we had made our arrangements even before I went home. After we graduated about the 20th of June, and I went home and stayed with them that time until about the 12th of July. And I came back to Knoxville and we made our arrangements and come on down and do the looking around and so forth, and come back and marry. 30 or 40 days, it doesn't matter. And we did that, and we never did have any children. We were right at 60
there are not very many people you know who have celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. I know Miss McClure gave them a nice 50th wedding anniversary celebration when they reached that milestone. Okay, do you have any other questions before we dismiss? Professor Nash, we thank you for coming and doing what you do best, teaching. Thank you so much.
In my last thanks to you, Ealy, and to the student body of this school and particularly Englewood, as I take with my last to you.
We hope
It's
not.
been a joy to me over the years to come here to see you because these things that are vital to all of us, everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you. Friday, July 19th, 1985, the following article appeared in the Daily Post-Athenian in Athens, Tennessee. It was written by Fran Ehlers, DPA staff writer. It is entitled, Professor, How He Came to Teach This Town a Lesson, One It Will Never Forget. It starts with a quotation, a reference to William E. Nash by Paul Zimmerman, Director Emeritus of the Sudan Bible Mission, quoting the greatness of Albert Schweitzer. Reads as follows, It is not so much what he has done for others, but what others have done because of him, and the power of his example. This is a measure of the man. What has come out of his life and thought is the kind of inspiration that can animate a generation. The second quotation comes from editor W.M. Tugman of the Eugene Register Guard in Eugene, Oregon, in a 1952 letter addressed to William E. Nash. He says, I have not forgotten the thing that you said in parting. I tell these children of mine that we must have the courage to stand up and speak for our rights, but I must not hate my neighbor, even when I know he is wrong. A third quotation is by the Reverend Charles Johnson, pastor of the United Presbyterian Church in Athens, in a ceremony recognizing William E. Nash in 1976. It says, there is a saying, giants sometimes walk among us, and we rub shoulders with them unawares. When they pass from our midst and we look at the large empty space they filled, we realize that we have been privileged to walk with such giants. Now I'll read Miss Ehlers' article. She interviewed Professor Nash for the article. 30 years after the Civil War freed his family, a hungry black child went from door to white door asking for cornmeal. It seems nobody had any. Willie Nash was 6 years old that hot summer of 1893. His mother was too sick to work, and the only other adult in the family, his grandmother, had died that spring. And so Mother Linda found Willie a flour sack and sent him to scout for food. Linda says, would you let us have a little meal? He'd ask at the back door of the next house, and the next. Taking a long, searching look down the road, the woman of the house would declare she just didn't see George, and George was coming with a meal, but sorry, no meal. Then came the third day. Willie tried a new tactic. I learned of a man, a moonshine stealer, and they said he had money. I knocked on the door. He said, what do you want, little man? I said, we haven't anything to eat for 2 days. If you let me have some meal, I'll pay you. He said, all right, little fella, come on in here. The man gave Willie some meat and half a gallon of meal at no charge. And from that time until now, I haven't used anybody's name but my own, said the 98-year-old professor, smiling. That same spirit of perseverance literally carried black education in Athens for 30 years at J.L. Cook High School, where Nash served as principal from 1926 to 1953. But in another sense, This teacher, talker, gentle man taught acceptance to an entire city of whites who watched as he accepted them, and the inequities of the age without bitterness or loss of purpose. For that lesson, most people in Athens still don't know whom to thank. Professor Nash lives quietly now in a house he shared with his beloved wife, Willie, McMinn County's first registered nurse. With age came blindness, a new obstacle to test tolerance, but his vision has gained a key edge, sharpening memory to a fine point. 6-year-old seems like yesterday, and three-dimensional pictures return, including the pain and the laughter of those century-old days. He's willing to recollect out loud, though he's not too sure why a stranger would want to hear. His soft old voice lilts and dips, giving vivid detail to his life as young James Edward Nash. He would weave a tale of poverty and powerlessness, but he refuses to color the story gray. It's as if his life, as it came, was somehow to be expected, and as it unfolds, a pattern of living whispers through. His memory starts at 4 years, when he and his mother, sister, and grandmother left the Ingram plantation, where his grandmother had worked as a slave cook and stayed on after the Civil War. Their travels had covered hunger, death, and hard work by the time he asked that moonshiner for food. James Edward, nicknamed Willie, at a playful whim of 2 visitors, kept his baby sister until she was 8, then worked from dawn till dusk until he was 17. Mr. Bell, a white farm owner who had taken the Nash family in, gave the boy his first job. Willie and young Lucas Bell were nearly the same size, and so they were paired to saw trees together. Willie moved to 2 other farms after that, his wages gradually increasing from $9 a year to $40 a year when he was 16. The next year, 1904, he was making 50 cents a day hauling supplies in a mule-drawn wagon when he had his own Damascus Road experience. On a long, snowy stretch to Blackstone, Virginia, he passed Blackstone Academy about 11:30 a.m., the day the white students were leaving on Christmas vacation. They were coming down this walk that led from the schoolhouse, and they had horns they were blowing. They were just having a big time, to tell the truth. I said, "That looks good. I'd like to be into something like that." At home, he talked to a fella just back from the Spanish-American War who told him he could go to the all-black Fine Institute at Chase City, Virginia, and work his way through. I said, "Well, I'm going to do that." He took $11 in savings and a suitcase of underwear and a suit, and on January 10th, 1905, walked the 23 miles to Fine and paid $6 tuition. Until that point, he had had only 2 weeks of schooling to learn letters and figures, and he was 17 years old. "I was the oldest thing there almost," he said, chuckling. "I guess I didn't have enough sense to worry about it." He started in the 1st grade, skipped the 2nd, attended 3rd and 4th, skipped the 5th. He graduated in 10 years after a full schedule of school, doing farm and repair work to pay his way. He pitched for the baseball team and went faithfully to Sunday school and church. "I just liked it all," he said. Even at that, Nash almost left desk and books behind, and in fact had application in hand to become a Pullman porter when he was called home to care for his ailing mother. Few of the black children in his mother's community had been to school, and the new graduate's presence had its effect. The people got together, the colored people, of course, and organized a little private school with about 50 students, Nash said. The parents, though generally poor, paid Nash the same as the white public school teachers earned, $25 a month, and eagerly grasped all that he gave. They even bought up his book salesman's supply of Booker T. Washington's autobiography. Nash soon quit selling it, he said, because most of them couldn't even read. I felt they were only buying it because of me. Nash stayed there for 3 years until he won a scholarship to Knoxville College from Thine. World War I almost snatched his higher education away early on, but as supervisor of the Knoxville College student workforce, Nash was exempted. For the first time in his career, Knoxville College President Kelly Griffin asked the local Armed Services Board to keep a drafted student home. There's not another man in the institution to take his place, Griffin wrote on October 1918. Nash hardly slept in the 4 years he stayed at Knoxville College. He attended classes in the morning, ran the work program afternoons, and served as a night watchman from 10 p.m. until 3 o'clock a.m., studying between rounds. And then there was a newly registered young nurse, Miss Willa Mae Pearson, whom he frequently made time to visit. The busy schedule resulted in average grades, but Nash graduated in 1922 at the age of 34. He had first planned to pursue medicine, again setting his sights beyond teaching, but he changed his mind after Griffin suggested his age might be a hindrance. In July 1922, after mulling 4 offers of principalship, he came to Athens to lead the Black Athens Academy, funded by the United Presbyterian Mission Board in Pennsylvania. The first day in town was a Sunday, and he met Athens through Sam Greenwood, a lay preacher at Zion Church. In his sermon, he said, "Somebody's been running around talking about Athens making a comeback from sin. Well, hell wouldn't have Athens this morning." That was my introduction. Nash spent the next day with Arthur Ferguson, who took him to meet the town businessmen and government officials. And that day he practiced, he said, learning to call white men by their surnames, something he had never done before, he laughed. I didn't know Mr. Greenwood saying hell wouldn't have Athens, but those men were so nice. I haven't spent a minute in Athens that I haven't wanted to be here. 4 years passed peacefully. In 1925, however, the Athens Academy burned, and the United Presbyterian Board of Missions in Pennsylvania decided not to rebuild it. Nash was considering other job offers, but community leaders insisted he stay, and he gladly agreed. Construction of the county-funded high school for blacks, J.L. Cook High, began in 1926. Nash took the new building and steadily, relentlessly made a school out of it. On November 12, 1926, 150 students streamed into the 6 classrooms at the new school to be taught up to the 9th grade by 5 teachers and Nash. 8 years later, 375 students from McMinn and neighboring counties, even North Carolina, were attending Cook's 12 grades, which Nash had acquired by adding a grade a year and teachers to match. The students, well, Nash simply recruited them. We had a mighty fine music teacher the first year. I had a bunch of girls and boys too that were anxious to go places, and we would work up a play and take it to Loudon and Cleveland and to Sweetwater, and we'd play those people off their feet. She was a real piano player. And he was building courses, classes, and enrollment. The professor saw the basic needs specific to his school. Some children didn't have a way to get there. Others stayed home to care for small brothers and sisters while their parents worked. Many couldn't go on to college past high school because they had no money. The school didn't have much money either, Nash said. The states were not giving up too much money out to the blacks. But with the help of national private funds set up for black education, he plugged away. He got hold of 2 trucks to serve as buses for children from Etowah. Boarding homes near the school opened up for children who walked long distances or who came from other cities. Students who had to watch their younger siblings could bring them to class, or someone would care for them during classes. The professor also saw a need for the women of Cook, some of whom had no means of raising money to continue their education. At that time, black children didn't have anything to do but take in washing and do a little housework, he said. I decided that I would go to the white missionary ladies' meetings and offer this program to them, that if they would take a girl in and teach her exactly how to clean a house in a proper way, that we would let them come and do it for nothing. The women agreed wholeheartedly, said Nash. The ladies paid those girls more than they were working, than when they were working for nothing, than they actually would have, that they would actually get when they were working for something, he said. Nash's on-the-job training program worked so well, the state eventually took it on, and Cook High School teacher Christina Alexander traveled all over Tennessee setting it in place. Meanwhile, the professor looked after the men as well, setting up a sort of employment office through the school, and during the Depression, Professor Nash gave the test that qualified Athens men to participate in the Works Progress Administration's Job Corps. He would never recommend a poor worker, he said, but all my students passed, and because I knew they were hungry. Mrs. Nash and I had to feed 2 families that didn't have a thing to eat. In all, the professor had 3 funding sources for his ideas, the private ones, the state, and the county. Black schools were low on the priority list of McMinn County Court in those days, but Nash had a plan and a friend, Judge E.B. Madison, who consistently backed his efforts. I would say, Judge, now we need badly 2 more rooms, he said. Well, how much are you going for? Nash would tell him, and Madison would write a resolution and sign it. Nash would take the resolution from judge to judge. He can still name them in the order of his route around the county until he got 9 signatures. Then take it back to Madison, and Nash would get his 2 rooms. Nash credits Madison, Tennessee Wesleyan College, and the women of Athens and many others with keeping black education afloat. He lists time after time with sincere enthusiasm how the kindness of others helped him expand the high school, or build a gym, or provide extra clothing, or set his programs in place. But an uncomfortable thread winds its way through this story. Didn't he resent at times that he had to ask for and finagle things that others took for granted, much like he did at 6 years of age with the cornmeal? He brushed the question off, then answered quietly, I never thought about what others had. I just tried to fill the needs that I saw. Nash led the school for 28 years. He built its ball team, set up its May Day festivities, chased truant children all the way home and brought them back again. He most appreciates the marvel of progress that brought him an intercom system, which led at least one child to believe that God, not Professor, talked to her on her first morning at school. He retired in 1953 at the age of 66 from his principalship, but not education. The spin-offs of that core Cook experience are unquestionably too numerous to mention, but they include his virtual founding of the Sedine Bible Mission near Spring City, his half-century as an elder at United Presbyterian Church, the input that helped Black Tennessee A&I College become a university, and membership on boards and councils across the state, and others from as early as his Thine days. He has a ream of awards, among them the first-year Community Builders Hall of Fame plaque presented by the Athens Area Chamber of Commerce this spring, and the state Harper E. Johnson Human Relations Award. But he's not resting on his laurels these days, even at age 98. No, the world still holds too much to spend a lot of time reminiscing, except he does have a little history to offer. He likes to walk, visit Sedine and Knoxville College, talk on the phone with old friends. But mostly, he says, He spends time involved in the legacy he's already left to this community. I think, he says. At the end of the article, there is a small article also written by Fran Ehlers that takes a quote from Booker T. Washington. Let your bucket drop where you are. I'm reading that now. Professor Nash has watched the world change dramatically in 98 years. The spinning globe of evolution, once set to turning, has remained in motion because and in spite of applied force, and from his long perspective, excuse me, Nash rejects the artificial push, but rather believes in the natural pull of hard work and time. His personal philosophy is based on that of a longtime mentor, Booker T. Washington, who urged his followers to know something and to have something and to be able to do something. That means, said the professor, that we need education plus the ability to turn it to a purpose. And it helps, he says, grinning, to try to get more than 2 pennies to rub together in your pocket. He tells how Washington, who emerged as a leader of one of the 2 black schools of thought in Reconstruction America, made his famous "Let down your bucket where you are" speech in Atlanta in 1895. Washington was encouraging the black population to make its place at home in the South, and he evoked the story of a ship stranded without water on the salt-free Gulf Stream. It signaled another ship for help. "Let down your bucket where you are," the ship signaled back. Nash, he said, took the story to heart. He could have left Athens many times, he said, but there's good water here, real good water. Nash's philosophy naturally extends to current events. Following are some of his comments. First, about Knoxville College. Nash has missed maybe 3 commencements or homecomings since he graduated from Knoxville College, and its recent problems, declining enrollment, temporary loss of accreditation, lack of funds, seriously concern him. From a historical perspective, he said, 2 things sent the college into a tailspin. Integration, which allowed black students to attend any college they chose, not just a black college, and a radical turn in the 1960s and 1970s, which caused the United Presbyterian Mission Board to withdraw a hefty amount of funding. He passes no judgment on the reasons. They're just fact. The solution? I feel it's impossible to continue indefinitely. You might say 2 separate schools, all black and all white. I think they should gradually integrate, but not to get in too big of a hurry. His next comment is about busing. I've never been satisfied with busing. I hold that we should zone it and select the facilities for the school and let the child go to the school that's in his zone. Black and white. More black than white or all black if you have the facilities picked on an equal basis and have the county and the state pay them equal attention. Why, he'll get as good an education one place or another. I think some hold if you're black or white, go together, while they'll get acquainted with each other and therefore really integrate more than if they're at their own school, which is a fact. But you can't push a thing too fast. His next comment is on Tennessee's career ladder system. Raising the teacher's salary is wonderful, but I don't like the merit system. I don't want them to be in competition. Don't tell me if you give me more money, I'll do more. I'm doing all I can. They all need salary and encouragement, but I don't think that's encouraging to them to be in competition. His last comment is about national politics. Nash is an old-line Republican, he said, but I'm largely for the person. He opposed Richard Nixon. He liked Jimmy Carter's approach. He slowly came around to backing President Reagan. He wasn't particularly impressed with Jesse Jackson's bid this past election because he more or less divided the Democratic ticket. The race should have been left to the appointed representatives, he said. If Jackson had never said a word, Mondale might have won. He concludes with his thoughts on age. Nash knows of no secret to long life, he said, but he credits most of his to the nurse with whom he lived for nearly 60 years. He suffered a near-fatal stroke in the mid-1970s, from which his wife, Miss Willie, helped him to recover. Living with Mrs. Nash all these years, I believed, helped me the most. There is one other thing that was on that page in the Daily Post-Athenian. It is the program that was used for the opening day at Cook High School. I'm going to read it. Don't fail to attend the grand opening of the Colored High School on December 10, 1926. There will be an all-day program of the highest order, rendered in the new school auditorium, which will accommodate about 500 adults. Devotional music will be rendered by 50 select voices. The programs are as followed. The morning program was from 10:30 until 12:30. It began with music. The invocation was given by the Reverend A.D. Ward. Music again. The welcome address was by the Mayor, M. Ellis. An address was then given by G.F. Lockmiller. The second address by Judge W.O. Mims, a member of the school board. The response was given by the Reverend A.H. Ferguson. Dinner was from 12:30 until 2 o'clock. The afternoon program was from 2 to 4. It began with music. The invocation by the Reverend Malone. Again, some music. The address by the Superintendent, Mr. Hanks. Address by Judge E.B. Madison. Another address by President W.J. Hale of A&I State College from Nashville. The response was given by the Reverend C.H. Wilson. The evening program began at 7:30 and lasted until 9:30. It began with music. Invocation by the Reverend C.O. Goff. Again, some music. The address by Editor W.L. Porter, ETN, Nashville. Address by the Honorable R.E. Clay, the Rosenwald agent from Nashville. Refreshments were served during the entire day. The invitation read, "Come and enjoy the program and see our beautiful building, Athens, Tennessee." This concludes the reading of the article published in the Daily Post-Athenian on Friday, July the 19th, 1985, about Professor W.E. Nash. 1, 2, 3. Can you hear in the back? Okay, so that's at the right place. Okay, and everybody, Billy Joe, you're sure keeping behind the corner. Okay, class, it's my distinct pleasure today to bring to the 8th graders, and I guess this is for the 3rd time, Professor W.E. Nash from Athens, and he'll be speaking to us. And I'd like to tell you that he is my oldest friend. I have already told you all that he is a centenarian. He is 100 years old. He will be 101 on July the 1st. The best part about him is he doesn't look that old, and neither does he act that old. Sometimes I think I act older than he does at my age. Now, I want to introduce the very attractive lady with him, and I'll ask her to stand so that you can all see her. This is his niece, Mrs. Zelma Nash McClure, and just a remarkable lady in her own right. She travels everywhere with Professor Nash. She has raised a big family, and some of you all that I know are already looking ahead to your high school and your college classes. Ms. McClure has 3 engineers in her family, 3 of her children. And girls, 2 of them are girls. And 1 of them is a son, an engineer. So a family very much interested in education. So it's my pleasure to introduce her to you. And then our treat for today, Professor W.E. Nash. And I'm not going to take up a lot of his time with introduction, as I've already run over that with you in your class. But it is a pleasure and an honor to have him back with us for the 3rd time. in the last few years. He's been here many years before when some of your parents were in the high school. But to come back and speak to the classes where I've had the pleasure of teaching. Professor Nash.
Miss Ealy and students and teachers that you are here. It's a pleasure that only comes to one in a lifetime that he cherishes greatly. Sometimes it comes one way or another. But to be here with you this morning is a pleasure to be one of a lifetime. I have always enjoyed coming to Englewood. Just telling the gentleman, this is my 7th time over here. I've had 6 times in the school. I was 3 times in the high school that you had here years ago. And then I've been here 3 times to this school. And I brought a load of boys and girls and singers over here to a church one night, back about 1945, somewhere along in that. And so I've always enjoyed every moment I've ever spent in Englewood. And I'm so glad that I'm able to be back. I felt when I left last time that I wouldn't be able to come back. But I said, if the Lord will just give me strength enough, I'll go back. And so, at this point, Miss Ealy asked me to come over and talk to you all about integration, about the integration of the schools and so forth. And I was wondering if you would want me to go back and give you a little sketch of Negro or black history from from slavery times, just say it that way. Now, you know, the Civil War, of course, ended slavery. Slaves had been in slavery some 250 years. And so, when the war ended, well, there were 3 amendments added to the Constitution. And they were 13th, 14th, and 15th. Those amendments, of course, designated and stated, of course, that all men, all persons in America were free and independent, and was supposed to be to receive the benefits of everything that a good citizen should receive. And so, right after that, I'm going to follow the Negro or the black education. Right after that, the white churches in the North, more especially, they began to set up stations along the East Coast here, at which the black slaves, ex-slaves, could go to school a little bit. And so that went on for a while. And of course, in the United Presbyterian Church, they had a number, well, it was 15 to be exact, 15 stations, starting at Camden, Alabama, and going to Norfolk, Virginia. And I couldn't name them all, but I won't take time for that. But in that lineup, they established one in Athens in 1889. Now, I shall not try to, some of my talk is not going to carry the exact dates, because the dates are a little bit hard to keep in your mind, and I won't follow dates so much. But anyhow, that was 1889. Now, coming on up from that slavery time, and the schools of the church, the Negroes or the black folks at that time, they were not capable, in a way, speaking in common sense, they were not capable of entering directly into the flow of social life and all that with the white people at that time. A reasonable thinker would say that. And so they began to decide what to do. And so along in the 1880s in there, they passed a law known as separate but equal, equal but separate, I think it was, equal but separate. And of course they declared it constitutional at the time. And on that basis, of course, they separated the schools, they separated everything. They separated the eating places, they separated the trains, that is, you rode in a Jim Crow car, the blacks did. And on through there, they separated these things, and you couldn't go to church with them, with the black whites, and they weren't allowed to go to church together, that is. You might sit in the back or something like that. And trolley cars, you sit in the back, and so forth. Well, that went on until, I think it was about the time Eisenhower was president. That was in the 47, 89, something like that, longer than that. They contested that law, equal but separate. And it was declared by the Constitution, by the Supreme Court, that that law was unconstitutional. Because you couldn't be equal and separate because, well, I'm not going to argue it. I won't argue it. But they decided that that law was unconstitutional. And they cut it out of the court, out of the law for the blacks and the whites. Equal, but separate. Cut that law out. Well, when they cut that out, just about the time they cut that out, a number of blacks, boys, and men, of course, young men, wanted to go to school in Arkansas and Alabama and Mississippi. And the governors of the states decided she shouldn't go. And so Governor Farkas of Arkansas and Governor George Wallace of Alabama and Governor Tom White of Mississippi, they stood in the door of the universities and wouldn't let them enter. And President Eisenhower, of course, sent the marshals down there and moved them out. Well, from that point, everybody then began to work for integration of all the schools. We started off with all the schools. Of course, we had Jim Crow, as I've said before, couldn't ride on the trains together. And that is, you had the Jim Crow car for the blacks, and trolley car, you had the back end of the car, and so forth. But anyhow, from that time on up through here, they were working on the integration of the school systems. And so when they started on it, we said, well, we must get ready. Different schools and teachers and so forth said we must get ready. Now there were two ways that was used to get ready. One or two organizations and a man from Africa, they came over burning and tearing up these things and burning down store buildings and sitting in and all that kind of stuff. But that on the other side, those who wanted to do it right, we had meetings. We had one meeting at Methodist Church, Keith's Memorial Church. And at Keith's Memorial Church, we had a meeting with Chuck Redford was there, and Reverend Wilson, and Reverend Wilson was the black preacher, and the preacher of the church, and many of them there. And we discussed whether we would integrate the churches. We talked more on that. And funny about it, we talked for hours there, well, I mean a couple of hours, And right near the last, Chuck spoke up and said, well, now listen, we've been talking about how we'll integrate. Do we really want to integrate? Well, that caused us to have to think again. And so we did, and so we decided, well, let it be free. So then after that, Professor Hale, I believe, was principal at the high school. And he set up, I set up a meeting of the students of Cook High School and the school over there. And so we went over, and Milton Upton, boy from Sweetwater, who was going to school at Cook, he was the spokesman for the students at Cook. And I really forgotten, if I ever knew his name, I might not have ever known his name, one of the boys from the high school spoke on their side. And we had a great meeting that day. We had our senior class over there, and one or two others, and a couple of teachers. And so then the next meeting we had was, well, we just rocked along then, until finally we come now to Cook High School and the real integration into town. Now, lots of people wondered why it came off so easily and so smoothly and such fine spirit, existed through it. But we had many things back of it. In 1898, 1889, a man by the name of J.L. Cook graduated from Senior Theological Seminary in Pittsburgh, and I mentioned about the stations being set up. So the United Presbyterian Church sent him to Athens to establish one of those stations, which was known as Athens Academy. And following that, they had a 4-year high school that was called a normal at that time in Athens, and had a wonderful school there. And see, such men as John Cotton, Cook was first, and John Cotton, John Otter, and White, Jeff White, and finally Reverend C.H. Wilson came. He was the last one sent as a minister, and each one of those men were highly educated, well read, and knew how to do things, and they sent them there. Athens was kind of a choice place for them. Henderson, North Carolina stood a little bit higher, but Athens was next, and so they sent some of the best men they had from the college. That is, if you graduated from college, and those preachers had all finished theological seminary in Pittsburgh. So I'm saying that to tell you that the background of the blacks in Athens had a lot to do with the smooth way that the integration took place in Athens and McMinn County. That's what I was trying to make on that point. Now, I've said this in a number of places that I have been to and since integration. I was in New Jersey the other day, and I say this, and I haven't been contradicted, that Athens, McMinn County, integrated more smoothly and more like human beings should act than any other town or city that I know of. Now, I don't know of all of them, but I say as I know of. And I hadn't had anybody yet to contradict my statement. When we integrated, well, every teacher got a job. They got a job, not the same one they had, maybe, but similar. Something that was on their certificate to teach. And the only principal we had, of course, was Mr. Johnson. And So he was given Title I. Title I was a government job, and he's given it and a secretary over there in the school. Well, he worked so well there for 2 years, the state saw fit to put him into Nashville and give him a job in the Tennessee Teachers Organization. And so he did so well there. Now you know, I'm bragging now, you see. He's one of my teachers, one of my students from his babyhood up. And he did so well there, they gave him a job, they called it the troubleshooters. He's quiet down the troubleshooters. And you know, that's integration, and some places it's fourth, and some places that's the other. But anyhow, they gave him a job. And he did that job so well. They organized, the association honored him by naming him the head of an award. It's given every year to some teacher or some person, no, it doesn't have to be a teacher, to someone who has done well in human relations, known as E. Harper Johnson Award. And so he is one of the results, I would say, of the good spirit that went on at Cook High School and in McMinn County, and Athens and McMinn County. And so there are many other things I could talk with you about, but I hope I'm not doing like had another story. The woman had a little boy, and this little boy was doing a little everything that a little boy would do. And she said, "Johnny, well, you're driving me up the wall." And so he said, "Well, Mama, I don't have a license." And so I hope I haven't driven you all up the wall. And so I'm so glad to be here. Now, anyone wants to ask me a question, or Zelma, or anybody else?
May I make a comment before we start with the questions?
Yes.
Professor Nash is talking about the E. Harper Johnson Award for the person in the state of Tennessee who's done the most to promote good relations in the states, this type of award. You're looking at the first recipient of that state's award, Professor Nash. So it was just wonderful to have an award named for his former student, and then for Professor Nash to receive that award for a lifetime of work in that area. So it was wonderful for that, and you're too modest to tell that, but I tell it for you for that.
Thank you.
Brandon did not have that in his report that he read to you because he was covering the early part of Professor Nash's life instead of the later part. Or that would have been in the report that he had. Now, he's going to take questions, so where we have some questions.
You are eligible.
Yes.
How was the basketball program at Cook High School?
This a basketball player of ours that wants to know about the basketball program at Cook High School. She's a basketball player.
Oh, yeah.
She wants to know about your sports program.
Oh.
Tell about when they won state.
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll make
Oh,
sure
yeah.
he tells that story.
Yeah, that's in the newspapers from 10, 15 years ago. Yes, we had a wonderful basketball team, both girls and boys. And we sponsored Cook High School. We organized. We had 150 students to start with, and in 4 years, we had built it up. I mean, it had grown to 375 students. And we had athletics, we had football, basketball, track, and all of those things. And basketball now, that's what you wanted me to talk about. We had a basketball team. We only had, that was about the third year we've been there, something like that. But we only had took to Nashville. We only took to Nashville 7 boys. That's all we had. And that's all the uniforms we had. And I'll show you in a few minutes what happened to it. When we got there, there was a man at Kingsport who had coached at Ealy State College. And I have always in mind that if you're going to play any kind of game, keep your body in the very best condition possible, regardless of whether it is football, baseball, anything that your body is involved, and even the mind as far as that's concerned. Try to be clear in both body and mind, and in the very best condition. And so I took my boys there. Now I had a man over in the training shop, but he had no experience in basketball. And so I went with him myself. And so I took my boys to the room. I said, now you all go in there and take a bath and lie down. And at night, at the dinner time, I'll bring the meals to you. And so I went over, and on my way over there, I met the man from Kingsport, and I said, look here, I said, you coach here, Steve, and I've got a boy in my team over there, and he wants some bologna for supper. Would you give it to him? He said, no, wouldn't give it to him. And so, well, I said, I'll have to figure out something else then, but tell him what. He said, who are you going to play? I said, we're going to play Booker T. Washington in Memphis. Now, let me sidetrack enough to tell you about Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington had 1,900 high school students. We had 50. And they had 25 boys there on the team and part of the team. We had 7. And so those boys ate that bologna, got us there and came there and started that game. When we walked in first, the place just roared when Memphis came in, Booker T. Washington, Memphis. Our boys we just sneaked in. But when we got along about half, they saw we had them down. And we kept them down until the last minute we were ahead the last minute of the game. But one of our boys bust his shoe, and he didn't have another shoe, and we put a stub in, and he didn't, and the fellow made 2 scores over him, and that's where we lost. But we come that near, we come under the 2nd place. And we had girls to go after that, and the girls, of course, got 2nd place. So, yeah, we had great times with our athletics. I was a baseball pitcher in my high school for the last 3 years, mainstream pitcher in the last 3 years, and I'm a strong fan of all kinds of athletics. I listen to the ball games and everything now. Well, now, any other special question? I talked too long.
Okay, sir. Did that answer your question? Now, this was a state tournament. This is not regionals or anything. This was a state tournament.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
If you were taken to play at school that much larger than we are, how many would be scared to death? I'm sure they would. Okay, another question.
Well,
Scott, you got a question?
well, that's pardon me.
How long were you at Cook High School?
At the high school.
How long were you at Cook?
I was at Cook 28 years, but I was in Athens 33 years. I taught 5 years in the Athens Academy there when I did the real Cook starting. The Academy was run by the United Presbyterian Board. And it's one of those schools that I mentioned of when surrender, the blacks had no schools installed, and the good churches all over the country, well, especially the north, started what they call them stations. And I've already gone over this for you. The Giant Presbyterian had 15. Athens was one of them. And I've been in Athens now 65 years, going on 66.
Again, I'll tell you something about Professor Nash that he's not mentioned. He is the man most responsible for black education in this county. He took the school when the city and county took it over after the mission church burned and the Presbyterian church no longer supported it. The county picked it up, county and the city, and he is the man who built it to an accredited school, so that when a graduate from Cook High School entered a college with an accredited diploma, which is what you're wanting to get as you go on, no questions are asked and no examinations are given. Go straight in, and he's the man who built it to that level. Okay, Brian, you have a question.
Did Cook have a good football team?
Another sports question about the football program. And
Well, yeah, we had a good football team. We never did beat Austin, but we beat Cleveland, and Sweetwater, and beat a number of them, of course. We had you see, at the very first, of course, we didn't have enough Big Ten the first year or two. But by the second year, third year, we were rounded up a pretty good little team. And President Robb was so kind at that time, he let us play it on. You know, Western College used to have a wonderful football team. There was Pinky Waters and Rube McCary, and you might know one of them, which Willard Boyer. They were wonderful football players. Yeah, we had another little football team. We come that year beat Austin one time, but some other, I think I would have beat them, but Eb Kansler was carrying the ball. Instead of him going on, running on to the goal, he started pranking, sidestepping like that before he got to the goal. and so that's, but we had a good little team. You know, we went up to Kingsport and played up there. And we played Kingston, a number of places. I can't name them all now.
you're going to tell them where you got your uniforms. They might be
Oh yeah, the basketball, and Western College had you know, basketball at that time, and we went down there and asked the coach if he let us have some. So he said, "Well, come on here, and I'll see what I can find for you." And he gave us seven suits for, we had two very large boys, and so he picked out the two big large, they wouldn't give us, and he gave us 7 suits. And that is our starting in basketball. And then we come time for football, well, we did practice the same thing. That is our starting off. After that, of course, we bought our stuff.
Karen?
Can you tell us about his childhood and where he grew up and about school?
Okay. She's wanting to know about some of the areas that you and Brandon covered in your interview about your early childhood. You want to know how old he was when he started the school?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, all right. Now, I didn't go to school until I was 17 years old. I weighed practically the same as I weigh right now. I weighed 156 then, I weigh 160 now. But I weighed 156 pounds. I didn't get to go to school for 2 reasons. One was, the school was so far, the little school that they had, so far away. And then the other one was, my mother had 2 more children at the time, and I had to stay there and go to work. So I was hired out at 8 years old, and worked there at that place 8 and 9 years old. 10 years old, I worked for my uncle. And now, those first 2 years, 3 years there, I didn't get anything but the little clothes and a place to sleep, and that was on the floor, you know. But anyhow, I worked there, and then finally I went to work for $12 a year over Mr. Johnny Bagley's, and I stayed there 2 years. When I left there, I was getting $20, and then I went to Mr. Douglas Rudge, and I stayed there 2 years. I got $30 and $40. And the next year, of course, I worked drove a road wagon for 50 cents a day for Mr. Anderson Bagley and Fletcher Kitchen. And so that put me up now, going on 17 years old. And I was in Blackstone, driving 3 mules and had a big load of furniture on the car, on the wagon. And the Blackstone Academy was turning out. Of course, I had always, my mother always said, well, if I'm going to let you go to school as soon as we can do without you, and so forth. And so I said, all right. And so, but coming down, they were letting out. I got there on Christmas Eve, and the school was letting out. And they had a long boardwalk for long, up to the school anyhow. And so they were coming down there blowing whistles and horns, Christmas horns and things like that, and looked so happy, and everything was going so well. I looked at it, I was sitting on this mule, 2 sad old horse on, with cold as scissors, with about an inch of snow on the ground. I mean, 2 inches, I believe. And so I looked at that, I said, now that looks good. Look, somebody, I would enjoy something like that. So when I went back home, there was a man had been to Chase City up there. They had a bad case of smallpox up there, and he had smallpox in the Spanish-American War, and so he decided then that he would work there with those patients. You see, a person who's had smallpox, he can work in it, and so he came down and he told me about Fine Institute would take a boy, a young man, or a girl, either one, and give them work and work their way through. So I listened to that. And the next year, that Christmas, I had saved up $11 during that year, and a couple of pieces of underwear and one extra pants, and so I took it all and put it in we called it at that time a telescope. It's a thing like a handbag, but you put the top on it like you put the top on a shoebox, and then tie something around it. And so I put my on my shoulder, and I walked 23 miles to Chase City and entered school. And the first thing I met up there, I got there on Monday, and the boys at Fine Institute used to cut wood on Monday. They burn wood in the school all the way around to burn wood. And they cut wood on Monday. And so this Monday I walked up there, and the boy there, back then in those days, this young men like 25, 30 years old, like that, in any age, they wore long coats and had long mustaches. So the one there, he was a fine-looking fella. I walked inside and said, I'll come up here. He said, well, you were around the school? I said, yeah. And so I said, well, I'm the principal. He said, all right. So I talked with him. He talked with me a little while. And he said, well, you better go on over there to that building over there. And so I found out that he was just fooling me, you see. But anyhow, I got it back on 50 years exactly from that time. He was in Cincinnati. And this Nash and I came through Cincinnati, and they told me he was there. He was there with I graduated with his sister, and so they told me he's going up the street there a little ways. He's about half blind. They're going up the street there a little ways. They told me, I said, all right, I want to go up there and see. So I went up there and knocked at the door, and he came to the door. He was at visitor's house, of course. I said, is it John Hamilton? He said, yeah. He said, I'm here for you. I said, and he said, well, what is it? I said, well, you don't have to know. I'm here to take you back to Virginia. where you belong, so you'll be treated, you'll be handled. And he said, well, I don't think I've done anything. I said, well, that's all right. You come on out of there. So as she got outside, I said, don't you know who I am? He said, no, I don't. I said, I'm Willard Nash. He grabbed me. And so, but anyhow, I got it back on him, you see. And so, now, is anything else you want to know about it? Well, then I'll go on to how was the time?
The Cook High Chorus.
Oh, Cook High Course. Well,
Girls?
yeah. What I was going to say, our course converted North Athens. Now, I'll explain that a little. When I came to Athens, North Athens wasn't so friendly to black boys. And I had some coming through there from out on the country, in the country there. And about the first, second day I was there, one came in with bleeding over the top of his ear. And I asked whether I said, boy, hit him up there in North Athens. And well, so we got kind of afraid of North Athens. And so when Professor Bryson was there, and he and I got together talking, and he said, well, why don't you let your course come up and sing for us sometime? I said, well, it'd be all right. He said, yeah. He said, come on up there and sing. So they went up there and sang that time. Every little bit we had to go. Our course came over here, as I was telling you about, this is my 7th time here. We came over here and sung in church up there, across the track over there somewhere. Of course, I know when we got up there where they make all them turns up there, we just kept straight on out there to a church. I don't know whether it's there now or not. But anyhow, our course, we sang everywhere, in the schools, in all of the schools. The nicest letter I received was from down in Benton, here. We went down there to the white school down there and sang, and we had a nice course. In fact, we tried to have the best we could of anything we had, and that's what my way of speaking to young folks. It's one thing that I have said everywhere else when I was about to miss it, and that is, I'm not here to show off what I know or anything else, but I'm only here to try to inspire you and encourage you to make the very best out of yourself you can. Now that's my object, right here where I'm standing now. If that's not coming across, I fail, because that's what I want. And I'm so glad to have the opportunity to at least answer the questions of one of your fine young men here, and to tell me he got second place, and I'm better than he is. and so I hope every one of you will aspire to higher things in life. Get in there and do the right thing. And above all, don't get tangled up with strong drinks and those other things that spoil your life 3 ways. You lose your moral standard, you lose your health, and you lose the goodwill of your friends. Because even them that smoke it and drink it and sniff it with you, he'll kill you if he gets out and you have something you don't give it to him. So you see, you're just ruining yourself. And I'm sure you all haven't started. And don't start. And be sure to tell your friends not to start on any. I could tell you stories, of course you know a lot of them, that make tears run down your eyes, all on account of the habit that you've taken up from other friends or other people that they're not friends. A person who will offer you a drink is not your friend. A person who will offer you a marijuana or cigarette is not your friend. And a person who offers you any cocaine or any other of those things, they're not your friend. Now you can take that from me, because anyone, the Bible says, put not a stumble in your brother's way, a stumbling block in your brother's way. And so you obey the Bible when you not let them put a stumbling block in your way. I hope I haven't gotten off track, am I?
Yes, sir. We need to give that to everyone we can. Okay, Jeremy?
What kind of music is popular?
Well, the type of music, what, the chorus performed, Jeremy? Is that what you're asking, the type of music?
Yeah.
The chorus performed?
Yeah.
Now, there was a band that could, too.
Yes, we had band, it was band. But we
Tracy
sang.
and Matthew and some of you,
Yeah.
you would listen.
Yeah, what I was going to say. We sang, of course, back then they sang a lot of the spirituals. The old Negro spirituals were called. See, Swing Low Sweet Chariot, Steal Away, and like I said, Go Down Moses, and so forth. And a lot of times, I'll say this, lots of people say, Go Down Moses, way down Egypt's land. And we think that's our people. But our people were the ones that were holding down as the slaves. But anyhow, we sang that. And so, way I was saying that, the Negro is a black man. He's not the only one that's been in slavery. And slavery was a organized institution until Abraham Lincoln. In America, it was an organized institution. But I praise in the name of Abraham Lincoln for eradicating slavery as an institution from the earth. You don't hear anything much about slavery. Maybe some little dog corner back somewhere with a few in it. But Abraham Lincoln, the biggest thing he did was to eradicate slavery. I can think of some things in slavery that I've heard. You see, I lived 60 years more with slaves. 17 in Athens when I came here, ex-slaves. And they told me things that make you shed your tears that happened during slavery. Now, it's not whipping, whipping, anybody get a whipping, that don't look so bad for a while. And it wasn't starvation, but it was breaking up the family. And here you have a little family. They were allowed to have family. They had a little family, and a man could ride up in the yard with a big fat horse, get off, tell the master, I'm picking up some slaves. He said, well, what do you have? He said, well, I have a family over there, has 2 girls, 15 and 16, and a boy, 9, 12. So let me see him. Go there and look at him. And say, well, I'll take all 3 of them. Now there may be some old children, and the mother just break their heart. Now that boy may marry his sister, or that one of them girls may marry some other close kin, because when they leave there, nobody knew where he was going to take them. You see, he knew, of course. But anyhow, my point is that breaking up of families or family life was the worst thing I saw in slavery. I see in slavery. Of course, Roots portrays the bad part, but there were many good places. Good slave owners. Now, take for instance my slave family. My masters and so forth. Why, the midst of the woman that weighed 100 and, no, she never did weigh over 100, that's right. But she would let her oversee her whip her boys or men. She'd bring them to her, and she'd pull the ears a little bit. And then we stayed there until I was 4 years old, which was about 30 years after slavery, the whole family of us. The moved away when the family house broke up. Any other questions?
Yes, Dan.
Okay, I want you to tell, in case some or might be low on finances and whatnot, and think they cannot go to college, tell them how you work to go to college and found time to study.
And found time to
And
find
found
Miss
time
Nash
to
too. Okay.
Yeah.
Some of you who think you are not financially able to go to college, that I want you to hear how he went to college, and if you have the desire, you can go. You will find a way.
All right, I started that off up to, I got the fine institute, the boy fooled me, said he's president or not. But when I went over and talked with Miss Campbell, of course I had $11 in my pocket, and she said, you'll have to save $6, $5 a month, and $1 incidental. And so that left me $5. Well, she said, now you see Professor Robinson, and he'll give you some work. And so, all right, I went on over, saw Professor Robinson. He was there, had charge of the farm, and so he put me to working in the stable. That is the horses. Of course, he knew I was familiar with that. And so I worked there 2 years. 2 years. And in the third year, I went to have a store in New York. I'd go north in the summertime and work on places like brickyards and so forth for the first 2 or 3 years. And so I worked there in the next, 1980, had a little depression. And during that depression, I didn't do so well. And I was wondering how I was going to get back to school. And if I got back, I think I'm somewhere. Well, I'll have to see how hurry up. And so I worked. So I got a notice from Pittsburgh telling me that I could become a repairman. And I worked the rest of my years there, fixing locks and doors and windows and building boardwalks. Didn't have concrete streets there, boardwalks, and I worked there. Well, then I finished there. I stayed there 10 years. I finished there, went down to the country, and spent 3 years teaching a little country school down there with my home. We had a great time. And then I got to come to Knoxville College. I got down there. Well, you see, I didn't have the money yet. I just had enough to get there, you might say. And so I got the job as student foreman. Now, in that student foreman, I'll tell you this, and I'm going to tell it quick. As student foreman, I had to have work on the campus for the boys, and every boy had to work 6 hours a week. Had to put in six hours a week, and so I'd have to have work for them. I'd go out at 2 o'clock. They'd come in, and therefore we'd have we'd go to work, and they'd work until 5. And at 5, I'd go in and eat my dinner, and with the rest of them. Then I'd go to sleep, and I'd sleep until 10. And at 10 o'clock, I'd get up and get my clock and thing, and night watch from 10 until 3. Then I'd go back to sleep, and I'd sleep until 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd get up then and go to school and get my breakfast, and I had the schooling during the day. Now, where did I study? I studied during that 3 hours, that 5 hours that I watched. I would, it only took about 15 minutes to go around to the different buildings you see and have a clock to stick a key in. And so I'd make that in about 15 minutes, and then the other 15 minutes, in the next part of the hour, I'd be back in my room and study my lesson. That's my studied when I was at the college. And I graduated. I didn't carry off any big honors, but I graduated at the right time. I can see that for 4 years. And so that's what's over. I left that. They sent me to Cook High School as assistant principal on your fellow work. And I did that since. I want to thank you for listening to me all this time. Of course, I hope I haven't driven you up the wall.
No, the test is that this morning. We had one more question back here, Randy.
What was it like for the slaves, what would happen to them whenever they got in trouble?
Are you asking on the plantation where his grandmother was?
Or on the different lands, like it, like, whenever he said the 17 former slaves were in Etowah or Athens?
In Athens.
They some of the stories they said.
Okay, the type of punishment around here in McMinn County
Yeah.
for the slaves,
Well,
that's the 17 that you knew, the ex-slaves when you came to town.
well, these around here, they were ex-slaves, but different masters or different plantations had different methods. They whipped you with a strap and things of that kind, and they punished it kind of like students are punished in school, something on that order. One farm would do one way and one another. But you see, now these around here, they were all, those that I know, you see, they were all ex-slaves. And they were not having it whipping now. But one man, old man Hughes, said that if he went to heaven and his missus were up there, he'd tell them, send him down here. And vice versa. He didn't want to be where she was because she seemed to have directed the whipping of him. And so you see, it's a vast difference between them. But how one family or one slave owner treated their slave.
Tell them about how when slavery ended, some of the plantation owners gave plots of land to some of the ex-slaves.
Oh, yeah.
Divide some of their property up.
Well, we can go into this next period. Our program is not until 2 o'clock, so we have a few more minutes. So.
Well, you see, some blacks, every now and then I'll call them Negroes, because that's what we would call them then. Some had done so well while the owner of the farm, you see, they had great big plantations, but they didn't have these little farms like we do, 100 acres. They had 5 or 6, maybe some of them have thousands of acres. And so they'd say, well, John, you're going to be a slave. I'm going to cut you off a corner over there. In other words, I'll put it this way. The people of the South didn't know just what the black man was going to do when they turned him loose. That is one of the big issues. Here's 4 million, a little over 4 million blacks turned loose here now in the South. We whip some of them, we treat some of them good. Now what are they going to do? Are they going to do like the Indians, fight? Or are they going to cooperate and live together? And so that idea drifted well on up until, I can't hardly get through a speech without saying something about Booker T. Washington. That idea lasted up until him. They wondered who was going to be the leader. Who's going to lead these black folks? Because if they lead them like the Indians led theirs, well, we'll have to be dodging them and getting our heads cut off and all that kind of stuff. And so Booker T. Washington came up through there with an optimistic idea, telling them, of course, treat everybody right and live and so forth. They said, now that's the leader. That's the Negro leader right there. And they fell right in behind him. And so I won't go into that part of it, but anyhow, that is the way that happened. Does that answer his question?
Yeah, but Brandon has one. Did you ever take it, drink of alcohol in your whole life?
Yes, I'll tell you what happened. Now, listen close to this.
That's not a Bobby Giles question.
When I was working with Mr. Rudd, you know, I told you Mr. Rudd was the last one I worked with. There's a bootlegger that lived across the branch over there, about half a mile long. And he would send over there and get half a pint of whiskey. And he'd always give me a nickel to buy me one. You know, a drink in a little glass, you know, be taller than your finger. But anyhow, and so I drank it. And so when I got to drive in this road wagon, my uncle, now that I had drank there with him, well, he didn't start giving it until the second year, a year. And so when I got to drive in this road wagon, I had an uncle to come from New Jersey and to come back to Cambridge down there. And I had a load of, I took a load of furniture, a load of something, Blackstone, and brought him back on the wagon. And he had a pint of whiskey in his pocket, so he started drinking, giving me some. He drank on up the road. So we got on up here to where he got off. It was still a pretty good little lot in the bottom of it. And so he said, I'll just give you this bottle. He said, you guys, that'll be enough for it. You got enough. He said afterwards that he meant that I had enough in me already. But I went over and drank the rest of it. Well, I didn't go but a little trip, a little ways down the road there. And I drove that wagon between the steps and the house, which had some flour on it. And the people got the flour off. And I left there and went down through some little woods. And one of the mules got to lagging back a little bit, and the wheel got outside the rut and struck a habit. It so happened the Lord made it happen. It struck a little dead tree, and it broke and fell over on her, and she jumped. And when she jumped, I fell back. I was sitting on the seat there, the wagon's body was empty. I fell back over in the body. And those mules carried me about a mile and a half through the woods back to my home, back to the place. And I was in that wagon body there about 2 hours, something like that. And if they hadn't come up there and got me, I was frozen to death that night. And so, all right, through that, got the thing, came and got me, but then that same man, I went to Pennsylvania, down to Pennsylvania 2 years after that. And that same man took me out to a ball game. And see, I come here during that time. Just freeze to death. He took me out to the ball game. And every time the game was the saloon was a little distance down there. And so he would go down there and drink something, give me something. So finally, he had to leave before the game was over. He said, you just stay here. So I stayed there until the game was over. And when the game was over, that stuff that he got me to drink up to that time had kind of taken the juice out of me, as the boy said. And so I started across the trolley track and fell right on the track. And someone grabbed me and jerked me off, took me to that saloon and laid me on the pool table. And so I laid on the pool table about 10 o'clock that night, and I waked up and saw where I was. And I said, what is this? And the next day I went to Hoboken, and the paper, Hoboken paper, had a statement in there, a black man, it didn't say black, it said a Negro man, fell on the car line, hadn't been for so a man, he'd been killed. So you see, I have a good reason to tell you not to bother that stuff. Don't you think so? And so from that time, I came back to Fine Institute. I was going to Fine Institute then. I came back to Fine Institute and joined what is known as the Total Abstinence Society. That is, you abstain from anything that's alcoholic, no alcoholic drink at all. And so from that time until this, that was 1980. That's 1970. But anyhow, from that time until then, you can pour all the alcoholic drink on your thumbnail there, and it won't run off. I saw that was for me. And I joined the Anti-Saloon League and started speaking for just in the 6th grade, no, 4th grade league. Started speaking for the Anti-Saloon League in 1906 and 7, and on through that. Did you hear Carrie Nation? Well, Carrie Nation was our leader, and she was a woman that was so bitter against saloons and drinking. She had a hatchet. She'd go into the saloon and just take a hatchet and just break up everything. And we did the rest of it, let's go on. And we succeeded in making this country a dry country in 19 and 18. We had the 18th Amendment added to the Constitution, and it stayed a dry country until 33, I believe it was, when Mr. Roosevelt appealed the 18th Amendment. And I'm sorry that he did, and I'll always be sorry he did, because those strong things and other things that they've added here in the last year is detrimental to any young man. If he doesn't have courage enough to stop, if you have to start, he's doomed. That's the reality.
Okay, Brandon, that answer. Now, if you'd had two close calls with your life, you'd think twice about it too. Okay.
Can you tell us about the people that played sports and how they played in the band also?
I had told them about, and I don't think you and I talked about this, our sixth grade teacher played Cook High School when he was at Etowah High School.
Yeah.
And he told us a story about going to play and warming up, and there wasn't enough there to play until the band came in. It was possible to be in the band and be on the basketball team too, and these students cannot imagine that.
Oh, well, see, we didn't have enough students. We had students there had students who were active in almost every activity. Yeah. Now, they take a little tickle Keith, and a number of them, they were basketball players, chorus singers, and oratorio. We used to have oratorio contests every year. And I can name any one of them there. Yeah, we had the first gym, real gym. Everybody, it wasn't a real gym, it was a gym. We had a gym for the high school did. The way it did, I had a fine magnet training figure. Just took the seats up to see the seats all day down in the auditorium. Took the seats up and put them on the slide. Just put planks on them. And we slide those seats out in the hall, and we had a gym. And Riceville, North City, and Forest Hill, those were all the schools we had around here then. They come there and play each other, play us, and it was pretty small children. And so, yes, I'm sure, if he was there, he met us where he told us.
They cannot imagine. They think in high school you have to choose between music and sports and everything.
No, ma'am.
And
Not in
at that time you could excel in a lot of different areas.
Oh, yes. If you had time, you didn't have to just do one thing. And of course, and now here's the big thing. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? I don't think any school avoids you doing what you want to do well. And so I don't have an idea about this school or any school, but the teachers are so anxious. You might not think so, but they're so anxious to see you go forward and do great things. They wouldn't put a stone in your way for nothing, for anything. And so it's all right. You want to play basketball and sing in the chorus, and do any other thing that's legitimate and profitable. They're ready with it, right? That's where we were in school. I say all schools are the same as that.
I think that Brandon's Uncle Hugh was probably the last student that I've heard of at Englewood High School who played football and played in the band at the same time.
I see.
So I think your Uncle Hugh Reynolds was the last one who did that I ever heard of.
I see. Well,
Do you have any more questions before we get ready?
Do you still watch games on TV?
You know, if you keep up with games on TV and the radio and
yes. Atlanta Braves have won 2 games. And Baltimore's still way at the bottom. Yes, and of course, what's his name? They had 49 scores. What's his name?
Who's the high score?
Yeah, that's basketball. That's Jordan. Yeah. Michael Jordan.
You like Michael Jordan?
And then who?
You like Michael
Do
Jordan?
you like Michael Jordan?
Fine. Yeah, I love all basketball.
What about Larry Bird?
Huh?
What about Larry Bird?
Who?
What about Larry Bird, the Celtics?
Oh, he's all that you can't beat the Celtics. There's the Celtics. They've been like you a long time.
Okay, we're going to have to cut the questions off, Randy, but I'll tell you, not only does he keep up with sports, this man hunted for many, many years. He's a plumber, he's a carpenter, you name it, besides being a teacher, he taught chemistry, wasn't it?
Chemistry man.
Whatever, you know, this is somebody interested in everything, and that's what your teachers want for you all. Don't limit your interest, you know, whatever you're interested in, pursue it for that. We'll probably have to go to the gym in a few minutes and get ready for it. I want to tell Professor Nash how much we appreciate his third trip over, and maybe you'd like to have a round of applause for him.
I thank you so very much. I know you haven't enjoyed it as much as I have. I know that. Because, you see, I'm old enough to enjoy things. You're not quite old enough to enjoy something. But so a man at my age, you know, he allowed to be where he thinks people want him. And so I've been here, and I feel like you wanted me here. It's so happy that I could stand up this long and talk with you. And I hope God's blessing may be upon you and all the things you try to do is good. And don't forget that my main God is that you may be inspired and encouraged to do the best, make the very best out of yourself that can be made of it.
Education, or given only a meager taste of it. One man remembers his own struggle clearly. So much so, he quietly dedicated most of his 101 years to the education of black children in McMinn County. Professor W.E. Nash will never forget when he first went to school at the age of 17.
In the room I was in, the little children were so small, the little seats were so small, I couldn't put my knees under the bench in front of me.
With a persistence that was to mark his career, Nash studied and worked at Thine Institute, completing 12 years and 10. When a scholarship to Knoxville College came up, his drive paid off.
He said, there's Nash there. He's down there in Lunenburg, butting the Bullhouse Bridge. He said, why not send him?
After graduation, Nash took a position at Athens Academy, a Presbyterian mission school. When it burned, Athens and McMinn County built J.L. Cook School. As its first principal, Nash recruited students by putting on plays all over East Tennessee.
By 1934, we had 375 students, 12 teachers, and we were doing everything, and we were accredited high school.
Despite the attitude of the times, Nash asked the city to donate 2 houses that could be used for dormitories.
You could see what we were trying to do, and we just went on, and they saw that we needed it.
Nash started many programs with donated materials, Boy Scouts, music, and championship athletic programs. But Nash's greatest emphasis was always on education. Burkett Witt, the first black mayor in Tennessee and former Cook student, remembers that Nash chose teachers who set a strong example.
He hired teachers with respect, teachers that didn't drink and smoke and had good moral character.
Eubinia Prigmore went to Cook and later taught there.
Even though we didn't have maybe everything like they had in some other places, but we were proud of what we had and tried to make good use of it, because that was the kind of example that he set.
When cities around Athens felt the racial tensions of the 60s, leaders like Nash had already helped pave the way for integration.
Using his influence and his expertise in preparing the community for this change?
I'm a great believer in the timing of things, you see. A thing that you can do today, you couldn't do 20 years ago, and you may not be able to do 20 years from now. Everything has a time.
Nash officially retired in 1953, but students he influenced carry on the tradition.
He's left a legacy for black people to work very hard, strive to do the very best you can in everything that you try.
One thing I try to instill in all children is to want to do something, want to be something, want to have something that they can say that I helped to do that.
This is the Heartland series.
Time was when a woman could do her holiday shopping.
See, fine-looking man, 103 years old. I almost automatically say ladies. Ratio's 25 to 1 in my group. 25 women to 1 guy usually make it to 100, so think about that. Happy birthday anyway, William, you beat the odds. Look at that, isn't that the weirdest map you ever seen?